Introduction to LDAR. Here's kind of a brief overview of what we're going to be discussing throughout this little segment. So what is LDAR? Why do we do LDAR? What are the applicable regulations? Who's subject to LDAR? How do we comply? And what are the major LDAR applicability areas? So if we go here, what do you guys think are the major areas throughout LDAR? Leaks? Where would you say the majority of your leaks come from? Okay. And why would you state that they come from valves? The main reason they come from valves is that's the most used component. So that's how you're regulating your flow and you're making your processes run correctly. So you're going to be actuating them the most. So your packing is going to be the most heavy leak area that you'll ever find. So the bonnet is very static. It doesn't move. Same with like a connector down the stream or a flange or something along those lines. You're not going to be moving those. You're not torquing them. You don't have maintenance out there moving them around trying to fix something, or having your operators out there torquing. Excuse me, I thought I heard the door go. So with that, we're going to talk heavily on valves and make sure that we help cover that parts for you guys. So what is LDAR? In basic terms, leak detection and repair. So an LDAR program requires monitoring of regulated components and sensory inspections of all components in VOC or HAP service, and making repairs for regulatory leaks. So how many folks in here are still at a 10,000 ppm level for leaks? Okay. How many folks are at a 500 ppm level? Okay. How many folks are at the 250? There you go. How many folks are at the 100? Anybody from California out here in the Bay Area? Okay. So as you can tell, we started out with LDAR back in the early 80s, and the feller that I traveled with and learned most everything I know about LDAR is the one that helped create the emission factors. His name's Buzz Harris. He's actually teaching the experts course right now. But with that, what they did is they went in and did emission factors in the old style of a bagging study. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a bagging train, but it's a very detailed piece of equipment to make sure that you can capture the leaks. They traveled all over the world and basically figured out in different areas, different times of year, different humidity, different temperatures, what is the worst case scenario. So the emission factors that you guys have now were created off of that. They're outdated, yes, I would say that. But with that, now, as you can see, we started out originally, so if you read, how many folks are applicable to VV in here? NSPS VV? Okay, only one. How about HON? Okay, there we go, we got a few more. So we started out at a 10,000 ppm leak definition. Then with it came out like VV. And so VV stepped down to where now you have a 500 ppm leak definition. Then we went down to consent decrees. Or if you are one of the lucky ones and live in the Bay Area, you're at 100 ppm. So out in California. So as you can see, we're slowly stepping down for leaks, because now we have better engineering solutions, we have better design specifications that help us get to a lower point. So in plain English, LDAR is basically we find the leaks, we fix them. You don't need to know all the rest of the stuff. You find a leak, you fix it, away you go. You're happy. So LDAR involves many portions at a facility. So within the facility, you have plant management, who will allocate resources. You have environmental, who interprets the regulations and applicability. So in environmental, how many folks are environmental in here? Is that everybody? Okay, that's what most of us. So with that, are you guys only interpreting the regulations and applicability, or are you guys actually functioning as a part of your LDAR program? Or do you guys have a contractor, I guess that's a better term, to do that for you? Wow, you guys are, thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay. So like with her site, it's a very difficult thing. There's many folks that are involved because you not only have to go with maintenance who helps fix and do things like that, then you also have to have environmental, and you have to have that person that helps bridge the gap. So like she said, there is many steps throughout. So you have LDAR. How many folks do it in-house? Anybody, or is it all contractor based for y'all? Okay. Okay. So how many folks allow their monitoring technicians to actually torque a valve, make a repair attempt? Not very many. Okay, how many folks make sure when they get the data that you have to send it now to maintenance and procurement and what you might have? Does everybody else do that? Okay. So with that adds in a whole nother step that when you're looking at an LDAR program, you just added in a level of complexity. Making sure, complexity, is that even a word? I make up stuff as I go. So, but with that, you've now taken where having your technicians out in the field, you have to add in that 5-day and 15-day and really pay more attention to it. And so we'll get into that in just a little bit. But as you can see, LDAR is a very integrated piece, and it's extremely time consuming once you get truly heavily involved within this type of program. So why do we do LDAR? Well, for over here in the US, we do it because of the EPA state. And then you can even get down when you're in California, you have the state, then you have the county, then you'll have a city requirement. So as you start stepping down through all of these, you need to make sure when you're looking at what you need to comply with, that you're actually complying with the most stringent. So if you take in and you just say EPA, state, and then you have a local regulation, well, the easiest thing to do is basically look at what is the most stringent and comply with that to make sure that you're capturing the worst case scenario. So you want to make sure that instead of going, okay, well, I got to comply with the NSPS VV. Well, now I got to comply with California, has their own, it depends on where you're at. Then you have, in the Bay Area, you'll have Reg 8. Or down in the south of California, you'll have 1173. Then there's certain other local regulations within those counties that you have to comply with. And so you want to make sure that you're capturing that. So why do we do it? Because we want to reduce emissions. So VOCs help, excuse me, help form smog, HAPs, cause health effects, or hazardous air pollutants. And you guys know how to go in and pull the list of all the HAPs, correct? Okay, there's a few nods going on. David and I will make sure that we give you guys some links as we go through here. That's a good thing to save to your browsers, just so you can always they'll pop up, they'll tell you if anything's changed, if they've added a few, if they've taken away any, things like that. Then the biggest part is, a lot of things when we think of LDAR or any of these types of programs, we're looking at them directly based on why are we doing this? We're complying with a regulation, we're complying with things that we're getting told we have to do. But if you also start to look at it as what's the cost savings? You can actually start looking at and quantifying the emissions that you're losing and turning it around as you're fixing them to show a true cost benefit to your company. So things to consider. You have a lot of data, you have a lot of things coming in. You can actually show proof that, yes, the $2 million or $3 million, whatever the number might be that you're spending to have this program, you can actually turn it around and show that it's paying for itself. Maybe it's actually helping you make a profit because you're now keeping things into the pipe versus letting them escape into the atmosphere. So, excuse me. So all LDAR regulatory requirements are based on either work practice specifications, monitoring frequency, monitoring method, leak definition, and repair time allowance. So with this, I'm sorry guys, I got a cold and probably had too many cigarettes last night. So with this, we have a frequency for monitoring. So how many folks are on monthly? Nobody. You're on monthly for everything? No? Okay. Gotcha. So there you go. I was going to say everybody in this room probably is applicable to a monthly inspection, and that's on your pumps. Some of you, how many have to do it weekly? Yep. So, I'm just trying to gauge what everybody might know in the room, but yes.
This is for like liquid.
Yep. So as we go through, just on pumps, you have weekly inspections, you have monthly method 21, then you have your valves. If I add a brand new valve into my system, how many times do I have to monitor it before I can go to a skip period? 2 times, or there you go. So 2 consecutive months it has to be not leaking to be able to go on to a quarterly allowance. Now with some of the other regulations, you're allowed to go to skip periods based on your leak percentages. We've seen a lot of folks over the time since I've been around, and we've kind of stepped back from going to skip periods because it's very time consuming to make sure that you're tracking it. So they just basically have said, no, we're just going to keep with our quarterly data and just go with that. But, you know, it's definitely a good thing if you have the ability to track that. So what about repairs? So I find a leak. How many days do I have to fix it? There you go. So it's 5 and 15. So you have 5 days to make a first attempt, 15 days to have it repaired. Now, what if it's below the federal leak definition, but it's above your consent decree? A lot of folks would say that we have 30 days, and it depends on the level. If you read your consent decree, some folks have a 30-day allowance to fix something that doesn't meet the federal leak definition. But with that, then you just add in another layer of having to track and be in place and go, okay, well, this is a 30-dayer and this is a 15-day leak. And you have to, it just takes so much time that most folks have stepped away and just made sure that they just say it's 5 and 15 day. But so that, how about if a pressure relief device goes off? How soon do you have to be out there? And I'm sorry, this is in the presentation too, but I like to just talk. 24 hour, okay. So with the rule, it's 5 days that you have to make sure that it's gone back to NDE or no detectable emissions. So we've kind of gone over, yes ma'am.
5 days. Do you count the day that you found it as day 1? Or is that day 0 and then the following day is day 1?
Depends on the site. It's how you would interpret it and what your attorneys and your site feels is the correct interpretation. With me, the second that you find it, it starts the clock. But I make sure if I'm doing an LDAR audit on y'all, I make sure that I understand how you guys handle those, and then we look at it that direction to make sure that, okay, here's how we've always handled it, then I would support that data. So federally, we have a lot, and these are just a few. You have NESHAP, NSPS, HON, MON, and MACT. So with that, you got MACT-CC, then you have NSPS VV, and then you have GGG, and GGGA, and VVA. And so you have this layer of complexity that you've got to make sure that you're following the right rules, make sure that you've done the right applicability, that you're in the right service type. So then you have state. So you got like the TCEQ. How many folks are from Texas in here? All righty, there's a lot of folks from Texas. Then you have the IDEM, SAQMD, so the South Coast Air Quality Management Division. They're a great one to play with. Is anybody from like LA here? Okay. So you guys have seen them where most plants actually just have a private parking spot for them because they just drive in and say, hey, what's up? And, you know, they take out their cameras and a whole herd of them comes out and monitors, from what I've been told. Then you have the California Air Resources Board, ADM. Then you'll also have company or site specific, so you're going to have consent decrees or consent orders. So what's the difference between a consent decree and a consent order? Okay. So with a consent decree, it's something that keeps going on. A consent order is usually a one-time thing. Do this, we'll walk away. So if you have a consent decree, which probably most of you do if you're at least in the refining side, there's a few coming out there in the oil and gas side. And so with that, those are more living. Consent decrees take a very long time to get in place and get out of. I've actually never seen anybody get out yet unless they just shut down and that's the end of it. That's the only consent decrees I've ever seen actually be closed. So if you have one of those, they're very detailed. So general LDAR applicability applies to regulated equipment with 10% by weight or more of VOC and or 5% weight HAP. So a VOC is all hydrocarbons other than methane, ethane, and about 50 other specific substituted hydrocarbons. So basically you can go anything about C4 and above. Who? Yeah, but that's under their own internal state and then local piece. So then you have HAP, hazardous air pollutants. EPA has a list of 187 chemicals known as hazardous. And so with this, we will, I'll make sure David or I get it up so you guys can put it on. And every once in a while, they'll change it. It'll be 185 to 186, 187. They start adding and taking away a few of these. And so we'll make sure that we get you guys that link and where you guys can just go and click on it to make sure that, oh, shoot, this stream is actually applicable now. Or, no, we're good. It's just a good way to make sure you're keeping your program up to date. So general LDAR applicability. Stream speciation is done by heavy liquid, light liquids, and gas vapor. How many folks do that? You guys have P&IDs that are highlighted of pink is this stream, and orange is this, and green equals this. Okay. How many folks just have P&IDs highlighted? Okay, and just show a straight, here, this is an LDAR, and you call it good. So one thing with this is stream speciation is very important because you don't want to be monitoring water. That would be a waste of time. You don't want to be monitoring an airline. So without this, how do you teach your LDAR technicians or make sure that your program is in shape without having the speciation data to prove that this should be in or shouldn't be in? So if you guys ever do get audited, you want to make sure that you have documented proof of why you have this in your program and why you don't have this in your program. So speciation is a very important part. How many folks did it internally, and how many folks did it with an engineer? I'm sorry? Internally? And did you guys have your engineering department help and make those calls? Okay. So you want to make sure when you're actually looking at stream speciation that you're actually going to the folks that deal with it day to day. Sometimes, as we all know, how up to date are our P&IDs? Are they a little old, or are they brand new and they're just awesome? And we always keep them perfect. There you go. I got a guy that said that. We all know P&IDs kind of sometimes go to the wayside. And we try to keep them as up to date, but then we have MOCs going on and all of this, and our CAD department gets overloaded, and so they're not always perfect. So when you start looking at speciation, you're going to get with your engineering group who will help you make the applicability call, but you also want to talk with the operators that are out in the field. You want to make sure that you go to their operation shack and you talk to them and say, hey, you know, what's going on in this? Because one of our favorite things, and David is one of the leads in this, is he'll just pull a little tag number out in the field that we know is on a transmitter, and he'll go in and ask the operator, what's going on here? Because when we look at it, it might look like water, but in the LDAR program, you guys are monitoring it quarterly. Well, we actually just found this, I don't know, it was probably a month ago. We go out and there was a whole boiler feed water line tagged. And all we had to do was walk in and ask the operator, and he's like, I don't know if LDAR is important, but I don't think you're going to find a leak on water. So make sure when you guys go out there, based on the drawings, it could be a little bit incorrect. And so with that, make sure if you do find something out that you're reporting it back to your CAD guys so that you can have a very up-to-date set of drawings, because they're the biggest piece that help keep your program in shape. Equipment that has, yes ma'am.
Just letting the drafting department know so that they update the drawing. But then how do you manage drawing, leak dust database, and field? Because the taggers pay, but then you tell drafting, so then they remove it from the drawing. So now the drawing's not there, it doesn't match the leak dust, it doesn't. So how do you manage that? Because it's not just as simple as just let the drafting right now.
It depends on how robust you want your program. Most folks with your PSM department, you have a 5-year requirement to keep everything up to date. And so with that, at least every 5 years, you're going to get a new set of drawings. But like if let's say you're out in a unit and you find one line that is not on there, I would update it, and then you have your LDAR contractor or who is involved keep working on that. So it's always a living or evergreen procedure. So you re-highlight that one drawing, you update your leak dust program, and you put that new piece into your P&ID binder, basically. It's very time consuming, but with the complexity of these types of programs and some of the folks, you know, you might have 30, 40,000 different types of components that are in the system or even more. You want to make sure that if I'm investing this much time, at least I'm going to have the most up-to-date and the easiest possibility of not getting in trouble.
It's a good thing to do at the end of the month. Like when you have extra time at the end of the month, I don't know if technicians ever have it or not, give them some drawings, have them walk them down, write everything on the different on the P&ID and bring it back. Most of these guys have a couple days to do it. You can get through 1 or 2 P&IDs per technician or something. So just give, you know, they get their monitoring done early that month, give each of them 2 P&IDs, have them go out there. You'll get through the plant sooner or later.
So next one is equipment that has the potential to be in service of either greater than 10% by weight VOC and 5% by weight HAP are included in the LDAR program. So like we've been talking stream speciation, that's the only way you're truly going to know. Unless you have the old operator that's been there since the benevolence of the plant and he knows everything, then that's always a good person to go to too. But you want to make sure you have that data. How many folks in here actually use the exemption here in bullet 3? The less than 300 hours. Okay. Do you find it hard to track that? Okay. So this exemption is one that's very hard for a lot of folks to show proof on. So it's something, if you guys are taking that exemption, make sure that if it is just one or two components, you have the ability to do it. But when you're starting to look at whole sections where it takes a lot of time and you have to pull pi tags to make sure that you show flow rate and everything, that it is under 300 hours, make sure that you guys do have the documentation.
Is that required by the rule?
So it is required to show the documentation that it is under 300 hours. And so with that, and it depends on the rule, but there is a 300-hour exemption in most of them. But with that, make sure that you guys do keep it updated. Don't pull something that, we're in 2015 now. Don't show something that's from 2007. Well, back in 2007, I had this 300-hour exemption. Well, now my process has changed, and I'm trying to get more throughput going through and whatnot. So you want to make sure that the data you have is most relevant. How many folks in here have an LDAR written plan or a program manual? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So about 5 people. That's a great place to make sure that you have that. And that's where, if I was coming in to do an audit on y'all, that's where I would go to see what exemptions you're taking. So with that, you want to make sure on the top end that in that program manual, which is a great thing, and the keyword, I would probably invest in time of writing one if you don't have one. It's a great place to make sure that you have everything documented, not only for yourself, but for your site, so that you guys have those pieces in play. And if you guys want to see kind of a template, we have a few of those that we can show you and kind of just let you know what's a good thing to put in there and what isn't. So, LDAR applicable facilities. So you got oil and gas, chemical plants, petrochemical, and pharmaceuticals. Is anybody here from the pharmaceutical side? Okay, good, because I'm not very familiar with that side of it. But so each one of these have their own little pieces of regulations. Each one have different applicability levels when you start getting into the rules. And so we'll just kind of brief over this, but as you can see, they've been able to basically encompass everybody that has to be applicable to these types of things. So how do we comply? We identify regulated components. So how do we identify regulated components? Okay, little church bell still. We identify regulated components by stream speciation. That's how you know what's in your program. So then we have periodically inspected and monitored components. So what would that be? Is that your 5 day, 15 day? No? Yep. So that's where you're going to have your monthlies, your weekly visuals for pumps. You're going to have your quarterlies for valves. Depending on what, you could be going out as far as 6 months, maybe a year on monitoring those components. Then you have your annual monitoring for DTMs. Then you have your UTM plan for when that component becomes safe, how you are going to monitor it. So that step's a very detailed one. And how many folks just handle that just on a piece of paper? Or do we all use like LeakDOS, Guidewire, a system that helps us track all this information? Good deal.
What was the ECM word?
So you have to unsafe to monitor. Sorry, I'll throw out stuff like that. I guess I should clarify. So UTM is unsafe to monitor. DTM is difficult to monitor. How often do we have to monitor a DTM component? Annually. And what is the basic requirement for a DTM? 2 meters. So about 6 feet. Now, is it 6 feet from here? So just a little bit, well, way taller than I am, I guess. Or is it elevating a technician 6 feet? So in the rule, it doesn't call it out, but it's elevating somebody from the ground 6 feet up and then going past that. So the easiest way to put it is if you're walking on a ground level, think of it as it's 6 feet, then you add in your reach. It's usually about 13 feet by the time you add in your probe and everything. And I'm short, so it's more about 11 feet for myself. But basically at about 13 feet or above is where you could really start classifying a DTM. So you want to make sure that if you guys ever do something, do DTM audits and just have certain folks walk them down out in the field, because they might have put in a new platform. They might have added in a support structure or something that these components are now not DTM. So you don't want to get hit hard if somebody comes in and looks at your program. You want to make sure that you're just kind of keeping it evergreen. And DTMs, most folks have a 3% cap depending on the rule. So you can pick a unit a month or a section a month when your guys have a little bit extra time at the end or something like that. It's a very good little QA/QC method to do. So then you repair leaking components and remonitoring to confirm repairs. So if I find a leaking component, what has to go on it? I'm sorry? So how do we show documentation for that? Guideware. Okay, so your LDAR database, do you guys hang leak tags out in the field so that your technicians can come back out and be able to find them? How about if I can't fix a leak? What do we do? Delay of repair. So what, if you guys, are you familiar with the regs heavily? In a delay of repair, you have to have a tag on it at all times till it comes off. So I would make sure when you guys are looking that you have a weatherproof tag, which is basically any LDAR tag that y'all have right now for your leak tags. But you want to make sure that with that, you guys have it on there. So if somebody does come in or yourself, you can pull your DOR list and you can actually walk out there and see if you have a tag. Because you don't want to take a little ding on an audit or an inspection from EPA that's going to cause you a lot more money than, oh, let me just go make sure a tag's hung on it at all times. Keep detailed records. Most of y'all have databases. I only know a few sites that are extremely small that manage it in Excel or something along those lines, and I'm talking very small. So with that, you guys are very easily covered with your LeakDOS and Guideware database. Make sure though when you're starting to look into those databases that sometimes they can mess up, or at least my computer always breaks, it seems. So you want to make sure that you have something in play to do little QA/QC audits directly into your database to make sure that no ghost things have happened or magic voodoo where some key touches something and whatnot. So if you guys want help with that, we can definitely show you guys some good detailed reports that you can run that help kind of control the ability of your database. It also helps give you guys a good check to make sure you're happy with everything and that you guys are covered on the back end. So then with that, we report the results to the regulatory agencies. So most folks, how many folks create the reports to submit out? Okay. Now do you guys just press a button in your database and whatever it kicks out you guys are good with? Or do you guys actually manually look at it too? Okay. So with that, what I would say is the databases are great, but like I said earlier, you can run into things where you have ghost tags or something might not have been brought in or you have missing pieces. So you want to make sure that you QA/QC your results. So run the emissions yourself. You can type them in very easily into Excel, run them quickly with the numbers that are produced, and just make sure that A equals A, not A equals B, so that you're not chasing something around. You also want to look with the reports that you're reporting, that you've done a check to make sure that you don't have any huge increases or decreases, correct? You'd rather stay kind of right around where you've been going instead of all of a sudden, oh, I went from 20 tons, now I'm at a ton. something's going on. So you want to make sure that you're looking at that too, to make sure that you're capturing any changes that might happen within the field. Then you want to do QA/QC. You want to find any weaknesses and improve. So how many folks have QA/QC requirements at their plant? Okay. Everybody has quality assurance and quality control. So you want to make sure that you have a kind of a detailed list, even if it's your LDAR contractor or maybe you want to make sure that you're doing a rough check of everything. So later on, I don't know if it's in this pamphlet. If it isn't, I'll make sure it gets emailed out to y'all. But we have certain QA/QC pieces that can come into play. And it's a nice little spot checklist that we can give you that just kind of shows you, here, maybe I'm not thinking of this, and this is something that I should be doing on a day-to-day basis, or on a weekly, or on a monthly, or on a quarterly. So we have it broken out for you guys just to kind of show that. So if it isn't in there, I'll make sure that we get it emailed out to y'all. So we've talked a lot about this already. Common components. So how many people have open-ended lines in their database? Okay, so you store them, or is it a potential open-end? Potential. So you document the potential open-ended lines. And some folks do, other folks don't. Now, if I find a leak on an OEL, or your technician does, is that a valve leak or is it a connector leak? It can be either one. That's the trick question, sorry y'all. With that, it depends on how the site handles it. So you can either have it as a connector leak or you can have it as a valve leak. Either way is fine with me. You just need to show kind of how you're doing it. Most folks prefer to have it as a connector leak because you have a higher leak definition with that than with a valve. And at the same time, if you do find an open end or something along those lines, a lot of times they happen quite often. So you don't want to keep padding and getting in trouble and doing all that. So you'd rather make sure that, okay, here, this is how I'm going to handle it, and you just have it documented that way. But you also want to make sure that if you do have your open-ended lines in your system, make sure that you're following up with it and operation knows, because you also don't want some auditing agency to come out and just be like, oh, here is perfect data for me. I'm going to walk around and find all this. Because most OELs are about 10 grand a pop, depending. Once you have attorneys and stuff, they usually go away, but that's $10,000, and I don't know about y'all, but that's a lot of cash when you start thinking of the open-ended lines that are actually out in the field. Some other things is, how about sample stations? You guys all have your sample stations perfect, and you're happy with them? Okay. So that's a double block and bleed for an OEL. What I'm talking is like your Texas sampler, or you could have a, you know, I guess basically two valves and whatnot. So what if I have two valves and I drain it into a bucket? Do we have to have a lid on it? Good answer. Yes. And make sure the lid is shut. That's usually the best one when you go out in the field and you're doing an audit. And David's very key on finding these ones. You can just walk around and, oh, here's a bucket that I drain all my samples into. Well, you got to have the lid on it and closed. And close, not just the lid sits on the side and it looks really pretty, that you got the lid near it, it's got to be closed. So you want to make sure that you do that. And it's for every type of service. It's for your light liquid and your heavy liquid. So make sure you have those into play. It's a great thing if you guys are out in the field, which most of you probably get out at least once a week, maybe every 2 weeks, maybe even more. But you want to make sure that's an easy thing to walk around when you're going through your process blocks or process units, whatever y'all might call them. Just look for buckets and see what it is. If it's water, don't worry about it. But, you know, make sure that when you're walking around that if you do see it, then you can go help teach your operators or your maintenance personnel that this is a requirement. Hey, can you just put the lid back on? I don't want to get dinged with this and have have a finding which turns into a whole bunch of stuff and X, Y, and Z, and then you get to pay an attorney to help fight questions.
Question, when you have the double valve, do you have to have a cap on at the end?
No, so if you have, so she's asking a question about a double block and bleed. So to not have an open-ended line, you either have to have a double block and bleed or a plug or a cap on the end of your line. Now, with a double block, it meets the rule. You don't have to have a cap at the end. But you also have to train your operators how to properly close those off. So you got to close the upstream valve first, let everything drain out, then you close your bottom stream. Now, most folks, I've had many arguments, or heavily discussed, let's put it that way, where they say it's a double block. Because you can always backtrace upstream and find that next valve. But if you can prove to me that your operator went from here and then walked 60 feet over and climbed a deck and then went over and closed this valve and did it right and purged that system, your operator's a hell of a lot better than a lot of folks I've seen. I'm not saying that they're bad people. I'm just saying, based on what they're doing, to make that argument, I hope to God you guys have great proof. So when you do a double block and bleed, make sure that if it's super far apart, just add another valve at the bottom and then walk through them, teach them how to do it. Make it very close, make it very easy. Now there are other ones Mr. Heller is notorious for finding where you have the double blocking system, and we don't have a pad.
We do.
Oh.
There you go.
I'm not gonna draw it. I'm a terrible artist. But
You just wanted one.
draw it for you. You know where I'm going. So while he's drawing this, these are other things that you guys can take away from what we're talking about today. Of when you're doing your field walkthroughs or just talking about, these are very important things that you want to make sure it does meet the requirement for you have a double block in play. But if you look, you can never truly purge it, so you still do not have, that looks terrible. Do we not have better markers? Basically what he's trying to do is if you, okay. But with it, you want to make sure that if you are meeting the rule, that sounds great.
There you go. Show that one.
You go ahead, show it to them. You talk.
They can probably see it. I should draw it bigger.
Yeah. So with here, so right here's the in.
What?
Yeah, they can't see that. We'll find a bigger marker.
We'll work on that later.
But what we're saying here is, so if you have, I'm trying to figure out how I can mentally paint the picture. But you have two valves in place. So you got your double block system. But you have your first valve is here, and you actually are running your sample up and over. And then you have your other one. Well, how do I truly purge that system? You can't. So that top valve would still only have a single seed. So you would basically have to add another valve to the end. So and we'll get a better thing and I'll add break time. I don't even know when that is, but we'll get a better piece, show you kind of guys what we're talking about, because as everybody have got a lot more understanding and has been more aggressive on the open ends out there, these are ones that we're finding now. We've started to really help take care of the other OEL issues, but these are the ones that when you're talking to operators and maintenance, they got the two valves. Well, now let's think about this a little bit more in depth here. And so we got to take a little bit more of a step to help find these ones. And this is what we're catching a lot.
So the rule even specifies, it has to be bled.
Yes.
I noticed that.
Yes, we did.
What is process?
Yeah. In the rule, I'll pull it up for you, but in the rule it says it must be double block, capped or plugged. It's single.
The downstream valve is shut before the upstream.
Yeah, and it's because no matter what, you cannot have process fluid on a single seat. So you have to close the upstream first to move it to the downstream valve so that It's purged between so that you actually have 2 seats before it comes to the opening.
And it may not say bleed in there like you're saying, but if you go back to the open-ended line definition, it says only having contact with, one seat and then atmosphere, so.
So we'll get it up. It might actually be in here in a little bit. But we'll show you kind of what we're meaning once I get a better marker and things like that. So, major LDAR applicability areas. How many people have tags in their units? Yeah. How many go completely tagless and just have drawings or isometrics? Okay. So tagging applicability. With that, most folks hang tags. There's no requirement to do it. But how else are you going to make sure that this valve gets monitored, not this one? With that, so you got tagging applicability, which all comes in with your stream speciation data. Then you have open-ended line control. We've talked on that, and I'll make sure I get a better marker. We don't have a runner in here, or I would do it now. Sample flushing control. So what are the requirements of sample flushing control? Closed loop, closed purged, and okay, we'll get to that one when David gets here. So then you have sensory inspections. What's a sensory inspection? Pressed a button, don't know what that means. AVO. Yep. So that's anybody. So even if your operator's walking around and you hear something or you smell something, teach them to come notify you so that you can get somebody out there to see if it is part of the LDAR piece or something that needs to be, or, oh no, we're just losing steam, don't worry about it. Well, steam costs money too to make, so we'd like to get those fixed too. Management of change. How many people have an MOC program? How many people have had their MOC program not get everything that's in the field? Okay? So, we all have these, but we also have midnight valve installation. That gray guy that walks out and all of a sudden I got this brand new shiny valve added on that should be in the LDAR program. Yeah. So we all know that there's gaps. So in your management of change, we all know that, hey, I capture a lot of things, but some things I don't capture. Or all of a sudden, operators and maintenance decided that it's good to go in service. And I didn't get notified, and it's been running for 30 days or more, and now I missed applicability. Because how often do we have to monitor components once they've been in service? Is it 180 days or is it 30 days? I'm sorry? 30? That's good. Yep, I was gonna say, it depends on how y'all want to function with that and what argument you wanna make. There's no definite answer out there. Most of the time, what I tell folks is if it's a brand new process piece or a big section, do it within 180 days. If I'm just putting in a new little bitty piece, make it within 30, or if I'm replacing something, make sure you monitor it again. But what you want to do is make sure that you're capturing those 30 days, because you can potentially miss that with an MOC. They put product in because how many people have had the issue of what is in service versus what's actually in service to LDAR? So there's two different things. Because how many folks have had, and this is a good question that I like to ask, how many folks have had somebody say, this is out of service? You guys have, everybody should raise their hand with that question. You guys have all had out of service components. How many folks have had operations tell you it's out of service, but when you find out it was actually not LDAR out of service? So you guys didn't purge the material. It still had something, it's just not in operations right now, but it still has product in the pipe. Well, is that still LDAR applicable? Good. So make sure when you guys do it, some of the sites I've been at recently actually have another question added to their out of service points of making sure that Okay, is this LDAR out of service? Did you purge this? Or do I still need to keep it in my route just because you say it's out of service, it's not out of LDAR service? So that's a good piece to add in. Repairs. How many folks have run past their 5-day deadline? Nobody. You guys are great. So we've all had the issue of going past the 5 days or something gets missed. So with that, there's no easy answer, but it's something that you can help add in and just kind of do a daily check is what I like to call it. You just pull the information, make sure, okay, I'm going to look, and if I have something past 3 days that hasn't had a first attempt yet, oh, okay, I'm going to really put that up the chain. So what we always try to tell folks is have everything done at least on day 3, and then have everything done by like day 12. Because then it gives you at least a window if you are running into issues or maybe something's going on, that you have the ability to get those fixed and not get dinged for something small. Delay of repair. How many folks can just put something on DOR here? You can just, oh, that component's going to go on delay of repair. Okay. So with that, DOR is basically a license to leak. And so what we recommend is have more folks than just one sign off on it. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the story, and it's actually not a story, it's a true piece. There was a site, and it was a one-man LDAR technician. Well, he just started 1 month. He couldn't get everything completed. So he added in some items and took them temporarily out of service, moved a few to DOR, and just said, okay. He goes, next month I'll make sure I get back and I get those back on a quarterly and do all of it. Well, he was behind again the next month. So he put a little bit more on temporarily out of service and put a couple more on DOR. And this went on until all of a sudden, about 90% of the plant was temporarily out of service, according to the LDAR logs, and on delay of repair. Well, the plant's still running and still producing. Well, this got caught finally at a semi-annual report that all of a sudden this was going on. And the guy was let go and a whole bunch of people came in, got him back into place. The point that I'm trying to make with this is he went into court and had to plead guilty to federal crimes and now has been basically locked out of everything. He was going to be going to jail, but he was a single father, and so they didn't push him into jail. But he had to plead guilty to a federal crime for falsifying records and putting stuff that on delay of repair that wasn't on delay of repair and items like that. So with those, you want to make sure that if you are putting on something on delay of repair, you have a very good checklist in play that basically helps you make sure when I'm saying this, I've talked with my unit operators, there is nothing else I can do. I've cleared it with the plant manager. I've cleared it with the LDAR technicians. Whoever it might be, you have a checklist and multiple sign-offs to put something on there because you don't want to plead guilty. I know I don't look good in pinstripes, so I don't know about y'all, but you want to make sure that what you're signing off on makes everybody else happy and covers everybody else's butt too. How many people have chronic leakers? Okay. And what constitutes a chronic leaker?
Either at least 2 times in 4 quarters or 4 consecutive.
So, and that's in your consent decree, correct? Yes. So it's only something you're going to find in your consent decrees, but it's something that if you don't have one, might be a good thing to add into your program. Just because if you have a component that keeps leaking, make sure it gets on the turnaround list and gets into planning so that it gets replaced. Because you don't want to just keep putting staff out there to try to fix this and try to mend it back together. It's better for y'all to just put it on the list, next turnaround, you replace it, and away you go. Oh, that was crazy. Okay, so tagging applicability. So when we talk about this, we've talked heavily on speciation and whatnot, but this is kind of what some of them look like. And so with this, this is a site that we recently helped put this in, but each one of these is a tag number, speciation data, and everything, and it's hot linked across. Most drawings are not this intricate, I can't, what the hell the word am I trying to say? Intricate, thank you. But with that, most aren't there, but it's something that you can try to get to. This was what we did is we were working with a site and they said, okay, hey, we just want to see what it is. So we took one of their very small process units and we did this for them. And it basically helped them get everything together. And they saw that, hey, this actually does help us prove everything we need. And this is way easier than me redoing my P&IDs all the time. I would rather just go in and click and change a few little pieces and hit print. So they moved it into CAD and a smart P&ID basically. So it's something that, you know, if you guys are ever interested in, something to think about, that you can just have this little thing and you don't have to do it right away. It's not a requirement, but it makes your program so much more robust by having that type of thing. So open-ended lines, did you find a pen?
I found some highlighters.
Oh, okay. Well, you should draw that pretty thing. So OELs are not allowed in VOC or HAP service, including heavy liquid. What is the only exemption if you read the rules? How many folks have actually read their LDAR rules? Okay. So the only one is basically asphalt. Asphalt allows you to have it because it causes a big issue. There's a few other ones in there on the OELs when you read that you can have a few exemptions. And so if it's going to cause immediate danger, they allow you have it where it's basically a vent. And so with that, I would make sure that when you're using those, you have the documentation to prove it. But asphalt OELs are fine. I don't know how many folks have an asphalt unit in here. Nobody? Okay. With that, don't worry about it there. There's no reason to waste your time trying to fix OELs in there. So, David, did you get it drawn yet?
I'm trying to make it look as pretty as possible.
Really?
Huh?
That's nice of you.
Isn't it?
Okay, so open-ended lines. Operations or maintenance staff who remove a plug are responsible for replacing it when finished. How many folks have that motto at their facility? Okay. How many folks have found out that that motto doesn't work? Okay. So with that, it's very hard because you have operators and maintenance personnel taking, or labs. It depends on what site you're at, who touches them a lot. But with that, we all know that the damn plug somehow never magically gets back into the pipe. So what can we do in place to try to help that? Some folks have gone to a level of painting them with fluorescent paint. I would highly recommend staying away from that, because if you have an auditor out there, that's just like the gold mine of fun. Oh, you painted all these for me and I can see that they're laying on the ground? Yeah, so I would stay away from that. We've had other folks put swivels on the end of their caps, and with that, that's a great thing until they break, and then they still end up on the ground. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there's many ideas that have been tried, but nobody's ever truly found out the best. One of my favorite ones I've heard is they had competition between the units, and what they would do is if they came out and did an internal audit, or like y'all walking out in the field and found an open end, well, you would be the agency, and you would find them, and they would take their money away from their budget and put it into the environmental fund. And they would find them what their last OEL penalty was. Well, that was great until the units figured it out, and then units would notice when people are coming in, they'd go undo the caps and the plugs on the other ones so that they looked better and did all that. So we've seen everything tried. So what you got to do is basically figure out what's best for you guys and what helps minimize it. But the piece that I would go with is just add another damn valve to the end. That's usually the easiest way, because unless you're standing right there and you watch an operator or a lab tech or somebody open that and close it, I have no proof that you didn't close the upstream valve first and the downstream valve second. So that's usually the best way to get away from worrying about caps and plugs. Just add another valve to it. Make sure that they have a good training, but when an auditor or an agency comes in, they don't have the ability to prove that it's wrong or that it was done incorrectly unless they're there watching it. So David's gonna hang up a picture here.
Where do you hang it?
Oh, just put it up.
Like this? Can you see that one this time?
I can.
It's green.
You should draw the other one instead, though.
What other one?
The one with the low point
That one. was
that I
too-
spent 2 days arguing about
Well, you
because
should've
of
found
you.
it yourself.
But so this is what we're talking about. So you have, this meets the definition, correct? Has 2 valves. But how do I truly get all of this cleared? You're gonna still have process. By the time I close this one, because I'm closing my upstream valve first, I still now have all of this filled because I can never truly purge it. So right here, I only have 1 valve seat to atmosphere. So this would be an open end. So if I added a valve down up here or put a plug would be the only way to solve that. So as OELs have gotten better, control has gotten better, folks have become more tricky in what they look for. So he'll draw another one here in a second. Yeah, I'm gonna make him do it. Yes, ma'am.
Other question. On OELs, is it, maybe you already mentioned it. Is there also an exemption for being in vacuum?
Yes. But with this, you know, you can try whatever you want, do whatever you want. Just make sure you basically keep your auditor away from those areas. So be the auditor, figure out how to help solve the problems. Because a lot of times we spend more time writing down open ends than other issues we find in the field when we're doing audits. So it's something that you as an LDAR coordinator or contractor have no control over, but if you help talk and teach, you have a better potential to have that control in place. Yes, sir.
Just a suggestion, kind of help a client of ours by eliminating some of that, or at least having the in-house maintenance or operators for maintaining their open ends. Part of the tag that we provided, we incorporated a Q code. So what they do is an operator comes in that have an OIR, they scan it, so it kind of shows who the last person just touched that device, so they can kind of like track down who that last person is. So if it's documented in that aspect of it, some of the operators and maintenance are fully aware that they look before they leave, whatever they unplug, connected and stuff like that. So that's the most effective that I created for one of my clients down in.
That's a good idea. And what he's saying is when anything, and if I mistake what you said, I just don't know if everybody heard him, but what he's saying is basically they have handhelds, and any time that one of the plugs is removed, they're actually scanning it and showing that it was removed, and it helps notify them that it's been removed so that they replace it. And if it doesn't get replaced, then they at least know who was the person that didn't put it back in, so then they can help teach and coach him to, or her to be better at controlling the open ends. That's a very good approach.
I don't like the accountability idea of other plants firing it.
Yeah, it's very true. But we talked about this one, routine sample stations. So they require flushing controls by closed loop. Wow, so this should be closed loop and closed purge. I don't know what's going. Yeah, the picture is bad there. And the control should prevent or capture any emissions. Emissions incident to sampling are okay. I don't know what actually that bullet says.
I think it probably says allowed.
Are allowed. So with what this is there is going to be emissions that are created when you're taking that sample. And that's understandable, that's known, that's a fact. Now, if you have a 12-foot line and you have to purge that line to get true process, that's not okay. So you want to make sure when you're looking at it, you don't just go, oh yeah, we're allowed to do that. Well, there's a piece that you are and a piece that you aren't. You don't want to be able to purge 12 feet into the atmosphere at all times. So, closed loop samplers, what they do is they return the flush to the process. Manufacturer custom design. Many use a 3-port two-way valve to eliminate fluid outside the loop, but at a short length of small bore tubing is okay if the sample can be collected without further flushing. So with all that lovely speak, what it's saying is, you guys probably all have these out there, you have Texas samplers. They're designed very well to return everything back into the process, and they help eliminate. But on this Texas sampler, how many components are LDAR applicable? Usually 3 or 4 of them. So the valves are in service more than 300 hours a year, and they have light liquid and VOC, or gas vapor, depending on where what sample you're taking. So you need to make sure that you have the correct components identified on these samplers. If you guys are putting those in, that's great, but you want to make sure that you got the LDAR side of it correct too. So we've talked a little bit about this, closed purge, bucket with a lid. Bucket with a lid. Make sure that the darn lid is on the bucket. The best is when you have the 5-gallon Home Depot buckets, or probably different at y'all's site, but the little, that's all I know how to explain it, the little 5-gallon buckets, and the lid sitting on the side. Make sure the lid goes on. And this is for every type of material, heavy liquid and light liquid. So it's not just the easy, normal LDAR mind thought of heavy liquids exempt. This is, it's got to be closed. And make sure that you label the container with the correct pieces. It's in one of the programs, not my area of expertise, but you got to make sure that you label it. I believe it's, what is the container labeling requirement? I don't know. You have to label it because it's hazardous waste and those kind of things.
So, I'm new to LDAR. You keep mentioning heavy liquid. So what's the definition of that when you keep saying, is
Heavy
it still LDAR more than 10% VOC? Or
So light liquid and gas vapor is anything that's above those or equal to greater than 10% by weight VOC or 5% HAP
I thought that's the definition for being in.
in LDAR service.
Yeah. So
And then your heavy liquids are going to be like your diesel.
right. But are
le-
they applicable to LDAR?
You don't have to have them identified. So you have to. Yeah, the answer is yes, but they don't have to be identified within what we're talking about other than in this area. Yeah, you have no monitoring. Thank you. I don't know how to answer the question.
So you still have some LDAR requirements for samples.
Yes. So everything basically that falls under the sampling stuff is going to be everything but like water or something along those lines, or something that doesn't meet the definition of VOC or HAPs. But from a heavy liquid standpoint, the difference there,
Still LDAR applicable.
yes, it doesn't have to be identified in your system. It doesn't have to be monitored. It doesn't need to have anything along those lines done unless you see an ABO or something along those lines. Then most folks will put it in their system just so they can track it that way. And you can also go out with that and prove that it's not leaking above any leak definition along those lines to show that it's below NDE, which is 500 parts per million. And ND is no detectable emissions. And then it can be out that way too. Yes, ma'am.
You also have exceptions for utilities, right?
Depends. Yes.
I know that would be considered LDAR, but if it's a utility, it's not.
Yeah, it depends.
It depends?
It depends on where you're at, but yes, for you, probably so. Anything else on those? You guys like that topic? Seems like lots of questions. Let's see, we've talked about these. So closed vent system. How many folks have a flare at their site? Okay. And you guys are complying with JA, correct? That's a Troy Boley question. But here, anything that you say goes to a CVS or closed vent system, you'll hear a lot of folks say CV or CVS for people that are new. It has to be at least greater than or equal to 95% efficiency of God, I am drawing a blank. Thank you. My brain is not firing on all cylinders at this moment. It's typically used for the gas phase samples. So you're going to route everything back. Or if you have like a pump that you guys have that's routed to your CVS system, there's a couple exemptions in there, depending on what rule you look at. And so you can look at all those types of things, but make sure that your flare's meeting this efficiency rate. And then signs of a leak are noticed by sight, sound, or smell, AKA AVO. So this is something good to teach your operators so that they can notify you to make sure that anything's going on. You want to make sure that whenever they are discovered, you guys are notified. And with that, this is what we're talking about. It's just the nice, dirty-looking valve, or you hear something, or you smell something. If you guys don't know about it because you're not in the field every day, how are they going to know, to report it to you? Management of change, we've hit very heavily on. I feel that we all know that there's certain pieces with management of change that are great. We also know that we do miss things. And so with that, you want to make sure that you guys are double checking it. Most folks have moved to a point of any MOC that's created goes through LDAR, no matter what. They are the ones that decide if it is LDAR applicable or not. Don't leave that to somebody that has no idea what your program is truly about. You want to make sure that you see those so that you can capture them. And then for down here, what the hell is this? Oh, at least you got to see my wife and kid. Down here, you want to make sure that anything that's going on, when they say it's in service, it's not operationally in service, that it's an LDAR service. So make sure that you're able to capture that, because anytime that you have process fluid in there, you got 30 days basically to do it, unless it's a newly constructed or modified unit. Pressure relief devices. How many folks have PRVs or PRDs out there? Everybody. Good. I like the hands. We're getting a little more interactive. That makes me happy. So with a PRD, what is the requirement? It's up here so somebody can spout it out. No? Okay. So you have 5 days if anything goes to atmosphere. So if you have a PRV or PRD pop, we've all heard them. They're very loud. You know they're going off. But what if it happens in the middle of the night when no LDAR people are there? How do you get notified? You want to make sure that when you're looking at information, it's another thing that an auditor's dream, that I can walk around to an operator and go, hey, show me, have you had any PRVs pop this year? And usually they'll come back and say, oh yeah, this one goes off all the time, and this one popped over here, and then you go back to the LDAR trailer, because you go up there, you look at the PRV, it's identified, tag number 7. hey, can you pull me tag number 7 in your crude unit or wherever it might be? When was the last time you guys monitored? Oh, well, we haven't done this for this long. Well, the guy said that this popped just 3 days ago. And then he said it popped 2 weeks before that. He has documentation that shows it popped because he had to go back up there and set it. How did I track this? How can I show that it went back to an NDE applicability? So with that, you want to make sure that anytime a PRV goes off, you guys are going out there to sniff it to show that it's been fixed within 5 days. Because unfortunately, operators are your worst enemy on that one because they'll tell you whatever you basically want to know. And it's only in the way that you phrase a question. Hey, have any PRVs gone off? Because I can guarantee probably most of you, if you pull up your database to show when was the last time you had a PRV pop in your LDAR database, it's probably going to come up with maybe 2 or 3 of those. Maybe a few more, maybe 0. So start looking into that one. So repairs, most, yes, boss.
So how, like in leak dogs, how would you put that in manual?
Yeah, as a manual repair, basically that shows, okay, hey, it went off, and you have the little note section is what a lot of folks have started using now that we've seen. They just say, hey, PRV popped on this date, and then you have your monitoring event. You just load it up into the handheld, have a technician go out, sniff it, create the event, put it back in, shows it's below. Yes, ma'am.
Kind of along the same lines, when you have those weekly visual inspections for the pumps and agitators, do you also have to enter those into your database, or do you?
However you want to make sure you have the documentation. There's no requirement for a database. You just have you have to have the documentation that shows you did it. Some sites have gone to where their operators have like it's a checklist on their handheld systems that says, oh, we walked through here, this pump isn't leaking, this pump isn't leaking, this pump isn't leaking. Well, you also, you want to make sure too when they're doing that all of a sudden I didn't see 50 visuals happen in about 33 seconds. That's great. No, because that means that they just didn't do it. So you want to be able to document timestamps and see. But some folks, I mean, we've had it where when we ask them for it as part of an LDAR audit, they just bring us a stack of written papers from their operators that are like this big and go, what week do you want? And they hand us a week, and that satisfies it too. As long as you have the documentation basically to show it. If you have it electronically, just make sure that the numbers do buy off. Just like with your monitoring data, you don't want the guy that has drank a Red Bull and magically got wings, correct? I monitored this valve on ground level, and in 10 seconds, I monitored something 9 stories up. So data is our friend, but it's also our enemy. So you want to make sure that you have the documentation. Just like with the PRVs, you want to have the documentation because operations is going to have the documentation that it went off. But do you have the documentation, or what do you have to show that it went back to NDE? And when I say NDE, I'm saying anything less than 500 parts per million, based on the rule. Depending on if you're in a state, it might be different. So make sure you read those. I don't know all of them. And usually when I go anywhere else, I have to read the state rules so that I make sure that I'm helping capture what I'm supposed to look for on the worst case. Alrighty, so repairs. Most rules require first attempt to repair within 5 days and a successful within 15. Who in here is in California? How many days do you get to fix a leak? It depends. But most of the folks have some of them have 24-hour rules. In the Bay Area, if you find a leak, you have 24 hours to get it repaired and fixed. So the 5 and 15 day no longer plays. So. Yep. So we've actually seen folks, California, the South Coast, doesn't even allow DORs. They'll actually like bring down a process unit to fix a big leak because they can't basically put it on. I've only known of one site that's gotten away with one DOR, and it took them a week and a half to get justification of why, basically, and they were granted it for about a month because they were coming into a process unit shutdown at that time. So some folks are very unlucky. The Bay Area requires 100 ppm leak definition on everything, and they have a 24-hour rule. South Coast has 24-hour rule, and depending on what threshold it's at. So just be happy if you're not in California. First attempt responsibility. How many folks allow their LDAR technicians to do these? Everybody? Okay. You're shaking your head. How come you don't allow your techs to do it?
We don't want the technicians, you have the LDAR technicians, I'm sorry, contractors.
Mhm.
You have to be trained on the process of eliminating valves. They may over-tighten,
Mhm.
they may, we just don't
Yep.
think they have the training to do that.
Yeah. So, and that's a lot of sites I've been to recently have moved to that because they had LDAR technicians who don't know about anything about what, they know what they're doing. I found a leak, I fixed the leak. Well, they over tighten so bad then when that valve is in play or there's an operational issue going on, now your operations and maintenance guys can't even function the valve because it is so over tightened. Or how many people have seen where you have your follower that's bent like this? Has anybody seen that? Yeah. They've over tightened it so bad that it's no longer holding the design specifications that you had anyways. They've tightened it down and bent that follower, so now that whole valve's got to be replaced and everything, and it creates a lot more of a mess. It's not going to get fixed ever. It's going to be leaking. And so with that, you want to make sure if you do have your technicians do it, that they do get trained. Have them sit down, set up a little bit of time with operations, and just kind of walk through, here's what this is. And we also have another speaker that will be coming in. I don't know if it's today or tomorrow, but they work for Flexitalic in HESU, and she'll come in and help give you guys a brief overview of flanges and packings and specifications and kind of things you can take away to teach your guys back of just small things that people don't actually think about. You would think the more you torque, the better it is, but actually that's completely the opposite. You want to torque within the specification, or you neglect all the other parameters for what's in those. So.
One more question. Sorry, I have a lot of questions.
You're good.
When you're doing your monthly monitoring event for pumps, and you have backup pump system, so obviously you're only running one at a time. You're running pump A, and
Mhm.
it's just fail or just hanging out. So what do you do? Do you mark that as out of service because it's technically not running at that time, or do you have to ask the operator switch to pump B, sniff it, go back to A?
Is it purged?
I don't know,
So would it be out of service?
but it's not running. I mean, that's. So
Do you
can
still,
sniff it then.
do you have process
So
fluid in?
that's a really easy one then, because
So-
it's not really running.
Think about, yes, sir. Sorry, just.
Our approach is, it is what it is. So a pump that's not running can leak just like a pump that's in on. So whatever state it's in, is how we monitor it. So it's a good both monitoring.
Yeah. What I was going to say is we talked about it earlier. There's out of service, then there's LDAR out of service. Is that pump purged? So did somebody come in and blow nitrogen through that pump to clean it out when they shut down pump B? I highly doubt it. It's still got process in it. It's still in LDAR service. So like he said, monitor it in whatever state you find it in.
Unless it is purged, then don't.
Yeah. If it is purged, then take it out. Yes and yes. You guys are.
I've just been debating with my contractor this last week because they found a pump that maintenance had removed the motor, but the line is all back and everything's there. I'm telling them it needs to be monitored, he's telling me it's not. But
Yeah, and that, I would stick with you. It does need to be monitored because it is not, unless they purge the system, which we've even seen where you come in and you find your blind flange is put in, they've removed the whole entire pump. And if I go out there and I look, they've marked all of the pump out of service that had the description. But when you go in, that whole entire line's still in play. And so, yeah, whoever your contractor might be, that's not something that I would recommend.
With maintenance, you only have one valve on the discharge and service block. You have a low point open, just on third. Would that be considered the open engine line?
No, if it's purged, you're good. And if it's a maintenance activity, you can have an open end.
So that, and it's also considered purge. I mean, if it's open to atmosphere and they're doing maintenance on it, you don't have to monitor it.
You want to switch, David? Go for a little bit. I feel like I have, but I don't know what time the break is. You guys probably know. 10?
5 minutes.
Ah.
Tell them to go early.
Is it 10? Oh, I got 9:50. Or 8:50. Forgot to change my watch, I guess. So, first attempts. We touched on this. Means to take rapid action for the purpose of stopping or reducing leakage of organic material to the atmosphere using best practices. What would you guys classify a first attempt? On, I guess I should probably rephrase it. What would you classify a first attempt on a gate valve? Tighten the packing, torque it just a quarter turn. We've seen where folks to do this, and I don't recommend it, but I can't argue with their logic. They spray 409 on the packing. So then they get away from the 5-day issue because they made the first attempt, because they don't allow their technicians to torque on a valve. So they'll spray 409 and clean off the valve, and that's their attempt. There's nothing that says that you can't do that.
How does that?
It doesn't. But that they are attempting,
The purpose of stopping and reducing.
because they're cleaning it off, saying that the residual on outside of it is what was causing the event in the first place. Sometimes, I mean, I've seen some weird stuff, but
But that stuff on the outside is not leaking.
Well, you'll pick it up if it's on the outside.
I know, I'm just saying, but it's not leaking.
yeah. Yep. They're saying that it ran out, it was a self-healing leak, and it's the residual on the outside of the follower that's causing that reading.
So you have a follow-up sniffing then after you found that leak, right?
But it satisfies you tried your 5-day requirement right there. Now you have automatically 15 days to figure out how you're going to fix
With
it.
that argument, though, you could say, well, it's not leaking in the first place. If it's only coming from that, it's not leaking any longer. It did at one time, you're saying the residual from the outside. So one could use that same argument to say, no, nothing is necessary. I'm just being devil's advocate here, but
Yeah.
read the definition, I mean,
Yeah, they still found a reading, so now you have this event that triggered. And so that's where it comes from. But yes, you could make that.
in that case, you're just saying that it's a false reading.
Yeah, you make whatever argument you want. As long, yeah. But as long as you basically can pass what I call the red face test, then you're good to go. If you can bullshit your way through it and still look very presentable with it, you're good to go. That's my advice. As long as the documentation you believe in, more power to you. I don't think the 409 with a nice little clean works, but I think that's a little bit weird. But when you have a 24-hour requirement or something along those lines, that's usually how you can get away with things like that, because it is so time consuming. You'd have to have a whole herd of people out there to be able to do everything. If you think of the amount of first attempts that you guys come up with a day, or if you have a consent decree action level items, anything like that, it would take an army of folks. So, how about I let you guys go to break, huh? You guys ready for that? Okay. Make sure you guys go over, there's coffee and whatnot over in the booth area.
All right, I guess we left off here at first attempts at repair. We talked about cleaning it off with some 409 if that's acceptable or not, all that good stuff. Obviously, the ultimate way to do that would be tighten your follower and all that good stuff. I think we're almost done with this section. I don't know, does anyone have it? How many slides are left? 40? Okay. 4 more of these and then we'll get into something different. What are we at here? Repair responsibility. We talked about who does your repair stuff. This guy here doesn't let his LDAR technicians touch anything. A lot of plants don't. What? That's right. Don't worry. I do some Colorado Reg 7 work. We don't touch anything either. There's too much liability in it for us. So whoever does it, a repair specialist, maintenance probably in your situation, you just got to get them out there doing it, be aggressive about it. I don't know if you send them, do you send them a report every day or something then? As soon as it's found? Okay. And then they just go out there and find the tag and repair it or make an attempt, and just probably harder lines of communication than having your LDAR person do it, but sounds like you're getting it done, so it's not a big deal. Then you got your 15 days. Just keep going at it until it's fixed. And I guess you guys have less than 15 days. Sorry. One hour, huh? That's fun. That's right. You better. I'm gonna go invest in 409 this weekend. Was it Johnson & Johnson making that stuff these days? Yeah. That's yeah, that's unfortunate. 1 hour, huh? Do you have tiered stuff then in Santa Barbara County? Like, depending on the leak definite, like your ppm reading, you have, yep, major plus and all that good stuff, or does it not go into that? Like major plus is what I think. Well, that's what it was in San Joaquin when I was out there. I don't know if it's kind of the same thing. Yeah. But those change too, right? Like if it says you have 24 hours to fix it at 50,000 and you bring it down to like 30,000, then you can restart that leak. Yeah. Well, we don't need to get into that. That's way beyond a lot of this stuff right here. Just know that you got to fix it within 5 days for most of you. 15 to final repair. Valve issues, tightening the packing. Boy, we got another, I don't know what VA is. Yeah, okay. There you go, valve, good job. And I'm probably supposed to say inoperable, but it doesn't. Again, picture issues. And more stuff going on there. Yeah, so tighten it. We were at a facility not long ago. Bronson was with me. Things were leaking fairly often. This was in a tank farm. And they'd go out there and the repair guy would go out there and tighten those things down. The operators didn't like it. And they would follow right behind these guys after they made those attempts, fixed it, remonitored it, and they'd go loosen them right back up so they could operate that valve. And those things were leaking just constantly. I mean, they would leak every time they'd go out there because operations did not want it that way. Don't let that happen. That's not good. I don't know how you fix it. Replace the valve or something. Put it on the next turnaround. But do something. Just that's not a good practice to have going on if you got your operators out there undoing what was just done for a regulatory purpose. Lubrication. I don't know if 409 would count as that or not. It might. We've seen big balls of grease. Stay away from that too. Sooner or later, your gas will flow through that and your grease will leak, but it'll just come out 100 different pores rather than one spot. Drilling taps, a lot of you guys probably have an outside source come in and do that. Some people have an in-house tech that'll do it. Replace the packing or replace the valve. The new ELP ones, you're gonna have to replace the valves sooner or later if you get a new cassette decree or something like that. Delay of repair. Nothing more than a piece of paper that says you can use all the time you want to an extent to let that thing leak. Repair is technically infeasible, so next process unit shutdown, you're supposed to get it fixed. Only problem is process unit shutdown is considered like 24 hours or something like that. So greater than 24 hours, so a little minor upset, you're gonna have to have the valve on hand, you know, maintenance ready to go out there and swap it out, all that good stuff. That can become a problem too. Go in, do an audit or something like that. You look at when shutdowns were and see if the DOR is carried over. You can see that it was, you know, no attempt was made to fix it within that shutdown period. Gets a little hairy there too. Remove it from service. You were saying you had a pump A and a pump B. Pump A is leaking, take it out of service, purge it clean, fix it. So another way to take care of that. Emissions. More emissions for shutdown than it would be to just let it leak. That's pretty much in any case, you know. You can make that point every time. I don't think you can shut a facility down and have less emissions than the valve's going to spew out of it. And then pumps can get a 6-month delay to upgrade the seals. So I guess those can't go to a shutdown. You got to have them replaced in 6 months. Most of them have a standby pump anyway, so you don't got to worry about those really. Concerns. Be sure about repair feasibility before putting the component on DOR. We also talked about all the paperwork and stuff like that. Make sure everybody signs off on it, just so you don't run into issues like he talked about earlier today. Regulatory reasons. Estimate, make a good guess on the repair date. You know when your next turnaround is going to be. Most times, go ahead and put that on the paperwork. It's just the simplest form to use. And make the repairs during the unplanned shutdowns if feasible. I don't like the words infeasible there because they do ask you to actually repair it if it goes down for longer than 24 hours. So. Mm-hmm. Bronson, you have an answer to that one? You have to repair them if it goes down for longer than 24 hours? You're supposed to, right? You have to make every attempt possible to. So if you don't get it actually repaired, you still have to make attempts on it. So I assume you'd have to show those, at least document that you went out there and tried to change it or something, or it came back online. A lot of times it goes on DOR and you wait for the next shutdown. You're usually waiting for parts too. So, you know, if your parts aren't there, you don't have to go out there and do anything about it. You're not gonna, I don't think you're gonna take it apart and repack it because your valve's still unavailable. But if you have the valve, you need to go out there and make an attempt to switch that out. So, yeah, as long, yeah. Right. Boom, section done. We skipped out 5 minutes early to get out of 4 slides, made me do them. Now we're going to talk about something different. So, all right, on to something different. Interpreting regulations. You said you wanted to know something about this, so hopefully we'll answer your questions within it. An overview, anatomy of a regulation. I need a new glasses prescription. These things are horrible. How to read the regulations, basically. How to extract the key requirements. How to organize your summaries. Examples from BVA for pumps. And group exercise. That'll be fun. New regulation is promulgated with the following sections: identifying information,
summary, some supplementary information, and outline of the preamble section. So we'll get more into all that stuff here soon. This is still working up to it. Outline of the preamble, summary of the First Amendment's new standards and changes since the proposal. So those things get like written, then it goes into a comment section, and those comment sections get reviewed, and those, then if all that passes and all the comments are made, then it can become a rule. We got kind of that going on with the uniform standard right now. They sent that out recently. I assume it's got about 20 billion comments on it, so it's at the bottom of a pile somewhere. And my guess would be you'd never see it, but that's my idea behind it. I don't know if you guys feel different about it. Bronson, what do you think? Is it ever going to make the surface? Wouldn't think so either. So you got a summary of the comments and the responses, like I was saying. So there's just so many of them, and it's so far behind right now. EPA, I think, is out of money as well. So I don't see that one coming into play anytime soon. And then you got a summary of the cost, environmental, energy, and economic impacts. Boy, what is this stuff? So your executive order review. So let's see where we're going with this. Executive order, something, regulatory planning review, paperwork, more paperwork, executive order. Here we go. Usefulness. Now we're getting into something here. As a regulated entity, most of the preamble will not be interested in interpreting the rules. Some of their responsibilities. For an example, Section 7, what does that mean? What's this example? Okay. Well, I didn't know that. So all preambles are the same then? Okay. So yeah, I guess all preambles are the same. So Section 7 is the part that's going to tell you what's going on according to this guy over here. So there's a preamble, and they're all going to be the same for all the rules. And Section 7 is kind of an outline of it, is what he was telling me. So most people don't read the preambles. You just go right to the rule. I mean, the preamble is kind of the...
Well, preamble helps explain this.
Right.
Where, why, the intent.
Right,
so
right.
if you're ever having difficulty in understanding what the rule says, you go back to the preamble, try to see what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Give you a little heads up on whether or not there's much strength behind the rule.
More on the preamble. Annual EPA Method 21 monitoring will comply with the AWP, which is the alternative work practice. So, in the final rule, requiring owners and operators to choose to use the AWP to screen equipment using the EPA Method 21 instead of the optical gas imaging system. So that basically is saying there is another way to find a leak without using Method 21 and going up to every valve and sniffing it, but the rule states that you're going to use Method 21 anyway, so you can't go out there and use the flare camera or the gas finder or whatever it is to determine what's leaking and what's not leaking. See here, experienced environmental personnel from major oil companies are reading the rules is required. Full number of optical inspections plus one Method 21. The preamble language makes it clear that Method 21 inspection is in lieu of the optical gas imaging. So 5 optical gas plus 1 Method 21 would satisfy the rule. So I guess that just contradicts what I said up there. So yeah, I don't know where that's going either. Do you know about this rule part, Bronson? Do you want to give this? Because I haven't read that. I'm just talking about preambles and stuff. Right. If you're on a semi-annual skip period. Okay. Rule standards. So about 100 pages back in the package, the actual rule language begins. Find the 8 sections in 60 subpart something. Name the 3 standards in 60 XXX2. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Are we going to, or is that a breakout exercise here? I do not have these all in front of me. Do we have that in the back of the thing then? Oh, it's not for me. Okay, sorry. I thought we were going to go through something there. Things that are required, we'll use words like shall and must. Should is a strong one. I don't think that's a required word. Back when we worked for the government, or when I worked for the government, the word should was telling you, you know, it's likely that you should do it, but we never used it as a strong, we used it as a strong one, but it was never an actual requirement where must and shall are. I would think so, but they say it's just at least a very, very strong one. Like I said, I don't believe that it's a requirement. Okay, right. And I don't believe it is either. So that one, I would agree with you, could come down to the next list, along with may and could and allowed and optional. Optional is obvious, but should I think you could bring down into the optional list as well. It's right.
Anyway, that's lawyers speak.
Yeah. That's,
Yeah, but I'm not gonna do a Title V because I didn't.
yep. Let's see here. Common language continues. Series of compliance with all the series is required. We'll use and. Oh, okay. So and or here, we're just talking about the difference there. Just simple logic. If it says and, you got to do both of them. If it says or, you got to choose one or the other, obviously. So you may also encounter a complex series owner operator shall requirement A and requirement B or requirement C. So there you have to do A and either B or C. You don't have to do A, B, and C. So that's just that one. Small example there. Review overview. Obtain the latest electronic version of the rule. Those are all available online. CyberRegs requires a login and password. And it's a great system if you guys have the login and password for it. Other than that, you can find it pretty much anywhere on the internet. You know, you just search for it. Bing will find it for you. I plug Bing, I own stock in them. Find it in PDF, bookmark what you need. I know a lot of people print these things out, put tabs on them, and highlight everything they need. I think that way works better. I'm not an electronical person. I like to actually have the physical document with me. So however you guys find it more, I don't know, adequate for your likings, it's the way you should do it. Use the find tool in Adobe. That one actually does help. But like I said, if you put little tabs in it and you have it highlighted, you can find it fairly easy just on paper as well. And then print a copy of standards. Oh, here it is. Highlight, use the sticky notes. So that's the method I prefer. He prefers the electronic method, so each person will have their own way of doing things. Break the rule into small sections, applicability, general standards, components. Read the rule language, create an outline in English. So we do things like that too, where, you know, the rules are changing when VVA came out and all that good stuff. You know, you have side-by-side comparison of what has changed and what you need to follow and where, you know, what applicability you're going to have to change and follow along with it. Follow the embedded citations. And And then review the preamble, applicability, general standards, and alternative method, test method, record keeping. Reporting briefly to check the language that might change your interpretation of the rule. As you said, each person reads the rule differently. If it says you should do this, you say, and you're not going to report anything because it said should. Other people might report a deviation because it said they should have done it. You know, some people take different things, different ways. I'm not missing anything, am I? ADIs, these are EPA issued more than 100 letters each year, Clean Air Act, applicability and monitoring issues. These are real good tools to go back to, and you can do searches for ADIs. These links are where you can find them. These are things people write in and the EPA comments back. BVA had a little quirky thing in it about doing 3 drift checks at the end of the day when you are done monitoring. I don't know if any of you guys have seen that or not. I know a lot of people thought that was a very bad language to put in there. They never changed it. There is a document out there, I have seen it, that said that they wrote that wrong and their intention was to change it when the rule went final. I never saw it get changed in the rule, so it still sits in the rule. And I don't know if that paperwork's enough to get people out of it or not, but it does say it is worded wrong and the intention was not that only 1 drift check was required. As far as it not being in the rule, I would stick with the 3 of them and keep going, but that's what you can find in these type of things. Just comments about what's happened with people questioning certain aspects of the rule and how it's interpreted. They're a great helpful tool though. What? Yeah, so like if they, right. They're more helpful for interpretation of it. I don't think that any of them are actual rules or anything. I think you could use them to get out of some stuff. Like I was saying, like if you only did 1 drift and you said, hey, you guys, submitted, you have this ADI out there saying that that's all I needed to do, I assume they wouldn't push I don't think they would do anything about it actually, since that's what they came back and said, that it was written wrong and it should be changed. There's other examples. Let's see, I'm trying to think of what another one was. There was a plant out there that insulated all their valves and they couldn't monitor any of the stems and packing areas because the whole valve was insulated all the way up to the valve handle. And they wrote one about that. And those guys ultimately had to come in and put little tubes on each one of their valves. And if they found it leaking, they had to go back and tear the insulation off and then actually monitor it. So like the tube, if they got 100 ppm reading or something like that, you can find things like that in there, It's just what to do if you're gonna, you can't go over insulate everything and try and take an exemption for it and that kind of stuff. It's just good guidance documents, basically, if you have questions about how something should be interpreted.
And I would answer, in many cases, yes, calling or writing in, asking a question about an interpretation.
Right. And that's how they interpret it.
Clarify interpretation, so if it's a little more stringent, otherwise read the rule, just know that that's where EPA is going to come from. And you can argue about it later with
Attorneys, yep.
but you're likely going to lose, especially with an ADI that's been out there for 15 years.
So you've never looked at those then? Or anything like that? Yeah, there's some useful information out there, but for the most part, like I said, just very informative on how to interpret it. So I guess ADI database allows you to filter determinations by the type, the dates, the EPA office, and keywords. So it's basically a search engine database you can go through on the website there and find things out. Let's see here, more stuff on it. If you need more definitive response, narrow the filter for rules offices and possible dates. Targeted keywords such as pump, dual seals, and all that. So just talking about how to use their database. Recent updates, ADI and SPS 12.00052. So they're added to the system in August 2014. Gives national applicability for controversial region 4 determination, about 180-day time for compliance. So this one would be about a process facility coming online. So what is it, 30 days or 180 days? It says it indicates the facility has 180 days to come into full compliance with all the requirements and performance tests. But this does not provide the grace period during which the facility is exempt from the work and the standards. So pumps and valves must be tagged, documented, and monitored within 30 days after startup. We've gone back and forth about that too. We still think that after something like that, it would be 180 days that you have. So if you go put a new facility online tomorrow or something like that, you have 180 days to comply with it, although the rules here are stating that you only have 30. Most people just take the 30 days and say, we'll comply with that. Although, the actually says you have 180 is kind of one of those gray areas. So actually just did a facility that was doing a new unit, and they wanted it tagged and documented and monitored within 30 days. So most people just take the 30-day requirement there and do it.
That was out of Alabama, right?
Yeah.
And there was, and it was like, an EPA letter? I thought it was like a letter to Region 4. Region 4 wrote.
It says Region 4 up there. So. Another beautiful gray area. I think we talk about gray areas later. There's pump gray area. Is that what we talk about later? I think so. We'll get to that. VVA pumps, the language. Pump standard covers about 6 pages. Major sections include inspection requirements, leak definitions, repair timeframes, alternative dual mechanical seals, barrier fluids, no detectable emissions, so like a magnetic pump. Starting to see more and more of those. They're just simpler, they don't leak. Pumps that vent the closed vent to the CVS system. You either see that or you see a nitrogen blanket on top of it. Starting to see more CVS system stuff there. Pumps that are unsafe to monitor, and pumps at unmanned plants. So it'd be like I don't know, like a terminal or something that's a ways from you that no one's ever at. View each major section of the standard and outline the requirements in English. Applicability is typically given in the section title. So pumps and light liquid service would be what this one is about. And then you have your inspection requirements. Perform a visual inspection on all light liquid pumps weekly. We talked about that earlier. Method 21, monitoring monthly. There is an exemption on that with those dual mechanical seals. I know some plants that take it, that if you have alarms and other things, you don't have to go out there and monitor those monthly. And that's where it says it right there. There's exemptions equivalent vacuum service, DMS with barrier fluid, NDE pumps. Those are the magnetic pumps that I was talking about with the kind of the Teflon pill-looking thing in it that spins with the motor there, and pumps a vent to closed vent. Pump leak definition. What's the leak definition for pumps? Is that 482.2 AB? Does anyone know that? What's it at your facility? You're new to LDAR? Yeah. Does anyone know what that is? It's a good guess. And what are the two subsections? I would assume the two subsections are like 1 and 2. I don't think the next slide shows it. I kind of glanced at this last time. Bronson, do you know what the next two subsections, do you know what the two subsections are on that? Right here, where it says 482-2AB. Is it 2AB1 and 2AB2? Okay. So it's just, we'll get into that here in a little bit too on how to interpret the rules and what all the numbers and letters and parentheses and stuff mean. 482, when a leak is detected. Again, same thing with valves there. You have 5 days to make a first attempt, and then the repair's got to be done within 15 days. And then you have the option to put pumps on delay of repair as well. So here's where this part comes in. You got the lowercase letters, A, B, and C. Then you got numbers, 1, 2, 3. Then you go into Roman numerals. Then you go into uppercase letters. So I was probably wrong. It probably went A, C, like Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 2. But that's how those go. So they're pumped equipped with dual mechanical seals and barrier fluid systems. The requirements are exempt from the inspection requirements. So I talked about that earlier. As long as you have some kind of alarm that tells you that this thing is going off. So you can either have an operator doing rounds, checking a pressure system to see that your barrier fluid space there has gone up in pressure. You know, that's one way of doing it. You can have an actual alarm that goes to your DCS system that'll tell you if it's lost its seal or not. All those good things are ways to determine if it's, you know, lost its seal or not. Barrier fluid, though, has to be a heavy liquid and non-VOC. A lot of people use just regular turbine oil, or royal purple, I think, is the other one that I've seen out there. PVA, DMS, and barrier fluid continued. So sensors are provided to detect the failure of a seal. I talked about that. And visual inspections weekly. Yeah, and same thing. They're checking for pressure on the pressure gauges on the top of those seal pots. Visual drips coming from the seal, those type of things. And there it is, 2,000 ppm. Pumps may be designed as NDE, which is no detectable emissions, and they are exempt from inspection and repair if, let's see here, what is it? EF, if pumps may exempt repair, if they're designed and equipped with a closed vent system and capture and transport any leakage from the seals to the process or fuel gas system or a control device, which would be your flare, which is 98 or 95% control efficient here. 98 is a new rule in where I'm from in Colorado. Pumps designed as unsafe to monitor, exempt from. It's on oil fields out in Colorado, so sorry I brought that up. That's a flare system on upstream stuff that they've put out there recently, and a Regulation 7 thing, which I don't know if any of you guys have any of those requirements or not. I think most of you are from petrochemical or chemical plants, is that right?
No, I'm too oil and gas work.
Gotcha. So yeah, in Colorado, I know they've said any new device that you put in needs to be 98% control efficiency rather than 95. I don't know if any other states have come out with a new one or not. I know California is starting to write their own air stuff for upstream, their own air rules. Ohio and Pennsylvania have new rules out that are recent that require the LDAR stuff on those. And I think they may have included some flare stuff in there. I haven't got into those rules a whole bunch yet. Wyoming's working on one. And that I heard someone else was too, but I don't know who that would be. Texas is always just going to use the TCEQ, I would assume, as their stuff. So they're not going to change anything anytime soon, I don't think. But there are new ones coming out in that oil, in the upstream side. Do you do it out there in Colorado then, or?
No, I'm in Texas, but I do.
Okay. So I think it's just on new units, I think, though. So any new construction requires a 98% efficiency rather than the old 95. But if you have the 95 there, you don't have to update it. Pumps designed as unsafe to monitor are exempt from the requirements as well, just like your normal valve would be, if the technician's in an immediate dangerous position when they monitor it. You gotta have it in your written plan why it's unsafe and when you will monitor it. So it's just basically when it's safe to monitor, you got to go in there and monitor it. So if it's next to, I don't know what if it's in like a IDLH environment or something like that. When that environment's safe to go into, your plan will say, when it's safe to go into, you'll go in and monitor the pump. So I guess when the system would be down and they're still processing the pump or something like that, and that environment's been purged clean to where you can get into it and go monitor it. Be an example there. Pumps at an unmanned site are exempt from weekly inspections. Pump is visually inspected as often as practicable. So that's just when a person's on site. They got to go out there and look at it. So every time they go there, I guess you'd have to have a pump inspection done on it. Visually inspected at least monthly, i.e. a person is required to visit the site at least monthly to perform method 21 and perform a visual inspection on that site. So you can get away with not doing it weekly, but you have to do it monthly.
And you better make sure you don't have somebody there weekly.
Yeah. Then it's not unmanned. It would be a manned site more or less. So, yeah. Plus, if they're there weekly, per the rule, you got to have a weekly inspection, or you got to have an inspection done every time they're there. So, regulations are not easy to read. Read them in small little sections, learn one, master it, go to the next one. Just keep going like that. You'll get your interpretation, someone else will get their interpretation. Share your ideas and how you read it with each other. It's the best way to do it, in my opinion. I spent a good 6 months overseas in China trying to do some LDAR work over there once upon a time. pretty much read the rule almost every day to start the day off, just to give me a good idea on what they said and stuff. It was, at some point you learn what the important parts are and what the kind of non-essential parts are for you. So if you can narrow it down to just some very key elements that you want to learn about the rules and trying to commit those to memory, you know, you'll have a better understanding of them, and then you can always flip back to the rule and try and get the actual, go to that actual part and try and get the non-essential stuff to finish off whatever you're trying to look into. But they're not very hard. They're not very hard to read or anything like that if you take them in chunks and learn it little by little. Pump leak definition is 1,000 ppm, but you only have to repair it at 2,000 ppm. This is a HON gray area. I don't know who here is under HON. It's probably going to be your chemical plants and stuff. But valve monitoring frequency determined by percent leaks as a rolling average of the last 2 monitoring periods. So if you're monitoring them monthly, you got to take your last 2 months of leak rates and determine your monitoring frequency based on those. Monitoring requirements are just distributed connectors. What does that mean? What does that mean? Is that a skip period for connectors? Wow. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay, I see what you're saying. HON? Yeah, hazardous organic niche apps. You're welcome. It's not, you're right, it's not a pretty rule. There's all kinds of skip periods and stuff in there, and I know some people that take them, and there's other little quirky things in there. I think there's a instrumentation valve exemption in there. Is that in, oh, is this on the next slide? I'm getting ahead of myself. Oh, there you go, instrumentation system. So there is, well, there's no bullet point about it being exempt or anything. Okay, so yeah, so there is an exemption on there. Some facilities will take it, some won't. I've been at facilities that have, it's like a 1/2 inch valve or smaller, you don't have to go monitor, and connectors are 3/4 of an inch or smaller are exempt as long as they're part of an instrumentation. So just try and be consistent if you ever take that exemption. I was at one place once and they did take the exemption on analyzer houses, but every transmitter block in the field was tagged and monitored. So just very inconsistent there on how they were going about that process. And it looks weird when you go out and look at it. You know, you have a couple hundred connectors and valves on a, you know, whatever, the instrumentation house, analyzer house, and then you have no tags on it, but you have all the tags on your instrumentation blocks in the field. It just looks bad when someone comes in and sees it. You know, like, why are you not monitoring this, but you're monitoring that? So you couldn't pass a red face test if someone came in and said, you know, told you you're doing one and not the other. Why is it? That is a true statement as well.
So what makes it gray?
Uh-oh. Gray area for pumps. Let's just skip that then. We'll come right back to it. Is there a gray area for the instruments? 75, and then we'll come back to it. Instrumentation systems right there. So I was right. Valves up to 1/2 inch and connectors up to 3/4 of an inch. And the associated stuff. They have no fixed monitoring frequency, and they have to be monitored or repaired if there are signs of an AVO. It's not hard to understand, but it is unique. It's what we say about it. And then, see here, the only hard thing to understand is why HON is the only rule with this provision. So I guess, you know, I mean, it's like like it just said, it wasn't really a gray area, but then if you're gonna take the exemption somewhere, take it throughout the plant. And as this guy back here said, there are state rules that will override that and still make you monitor it. I don't know which ones, probably all of them have it. Yeah, any rule that wants you to do valves, none of them will have an exemption of half an inch or anything on instrumentation. So assume all your state rules will have it in there. So although HON allows you to exempt it, no state rule probably will. And you have to follow your state rule provision. So assume that's why it would be a gray area. Your state rule is going to trump over your federal rule there. And that happens all the time out in Louisiana, if any of you guys are from Louisiana. Doesn't the Louisiana state rule trump all other rules? Two more states to stay away from, along with California. I didn't know about the New Jersey one, so that one's new on me too. But I knew the Louisiana one was that way. But as he was saying, I mean, state rules are gonna bring in all your valves as well. So just wouldn't take the exemption there at all if you have the option to. So we talked about this, a leak definition being 1,000 for pumps, but you only got to make a repair attempt at 2,000. Why the difference? To push units into the QIPs. So quality improvement programs. So that's basically adding in your dual mechanical seal pumps and stuff like that for anything that was leaking at 1,000, those type of things. Pump QIP is mandatory for any unit with greater than 10% of its pumps leaking. So if you have a small unit with 20 pumps and not require QIP for 10%, or 2 pumps leaking, but it would take 3 pumps. So you got to be over your 10%. Leak rates based on a rolling 6-month average. So valve monitoring frequency in phase 3 is based on the valve leak percentage. Over 2%, you got to do monthly monitoring. 1 to 2%, you got to do quarterly monitoring. 0.5 to 1% semi-annual, and under 0.5%, you can do annual monitoring. I don't know anyone that does these skip periods. As he was saying earlier, this stuff gets real confusing because it is on a rolling average again. So if you trigger anything at all, you got to go back and, you know, start monitoring them more frequently.
So what it is basically that I know of 2 folks that skip period monitoring, and what happened is they were on an annual period, and when they came in to do the annual, they actually was over 25%, and that triggered back in where they had to start at 1. So once you pop over 1, you have to go all the way back and work your way back up.
Well, then, again, a lot of the chemical plants that would also fall under this probably don't have a CD yet. So it's, you know, so they don't. So they can actually take it and they're not under a CD, so they don't have to comply with any CD stuff yet. But those are coming, so if you're in a chemical plant, you'll get one sooner or later, I'm sure. This we just talked about, we just touched on this. Except this thing just says you got to do it based on, let's see here, what's it say? A rolling average of the last 2 monitoring events. So it's saying, you know, if you're on an annual monitoring event, it may be 2 years. And then we just talked about how you got to be back, you got to go back and all that stuff. So there's lots of room to mess up if you got to go back and do all kinds of different stuff, like he was saying. So these are the disturbed connectors. Let's see here, exempt by each connector that has been opened or otherwise has the seal broken shall be monitored for leaks when it is reconnected or within the first 3 months after being returned to organic hazardous air pollutant service. If the monitoring detects leaks, it shall be repaired in accordance with the provisions of the paragraph unless it is determined to be non-repairable, in which case it is counted as a non-repairable connector for the purpose of paragraph 12. So take it out when you put it back in or when you reconnect the system back up, you got to monitor it. And if you don't see anything, you're good. If not, you got to go back and repair it. There again, they're using the word shall, so it has to be done. If you know a connector is open or disturbed, Sarah, what's that say? Not particularly difficult to do if you know a connector is going to be open or disturbed. So there's a line break procedure at all these facilities, so you know it's going to happen. You can go out there, get the stuff done that you need to get done, and monitor it as you need to. And you know when it's going to go back into service, they'll close out the MOC. So it's not a hard rule to follow there, just something you got to keep on top of again. You got to keep in touch with the MOC people and your LDAR people and all that stuff. There is an alternative to the requirements of the paragraph in this section. An operator or an owner or operator may choose not to monitor a connector that has been open or otherwise has the seal broken. In this case, the owner or operator may not count non-repairable connectors for the purpose of the paragraph in the section. The owner or operator shall calculate the percentage of leaking connectors for the monitoring periods described in paragraph B of this section by setting the non-repairable components can in the equation of the paragraph. So you'd have to see all those equations and stuff. I don't know them off the top of my head, but it just says so you accept slightly higher leak percentages and possibly more frequent monitoring in lieu of a situation where non-compliance is almost assured. So basically, again, don't use skip periods if you don't have to. I mean, there's really more of a headache than it is worth. I think what they're getting at there. And we already talked about this because I jumped ahead of myself. Okay. So that was HON and some gray areas and some other stuff. Now, method 21 requirements and enhancements. EPA method 21 was formalized for the screening method. Do you want to? Go for it.
this stupid thing, but. Alrighty, y'all. So with this one, we're going to talk about EPA Method 21. So who has been around long enough to even know what an OVA is? Okay, there's two of you. So most folks don't know what that is, but when Method 21 was written and developed, it was actually based on the OVA 108. And so with this, when you start reading Method 21, which you guys all know Method 21, I would hope, we'll get into a little bit of depth on that, but when you start reading Method 21, it says within plus or minus 10%. And the main reason this is because back then, the OVA, you would torque it, and I've actually only seen one, so I don't even know how to calibrate one, but it was on a log scale. So you can only basically see within about 10%. You'd just put a value in and, okay, yeah, that's about 10,000, and that's how I was explained how you calibrate it. So when you start going through here, yes, it does need to be updated because now we have the TVA 1000B, you have the PHX 21, you have a few others out there, and I'm sorry if you guys have one of those. I'm not familiar with them. But now we're on a digital scale where it's very easy to calibrate. And with that, we'll kind of go through here. These are just kind of the main talking points for this. So we'll hit like analyzer evaluation procedures were added, calibration procedures were added, and monitoring procedures were formalized. So, how did I do two of those? Sorry, y'all. I'm not good with these things. What it was is it was formalized as an EPA referenced method. Uses the same outlines as other references method, which are mostly stack testing. Section titles may seem odd when applied to LDAR. So, Method 21, analyzer specifications. It must respond to the compound of interest. So, have you guys all read the manual and seen what they do respond to and what they don't respond to? That's why we have the FID and the PID, and you have different, how many folks use a PID in this room? Anybody? Okay, so with the PID, you have to actually know what light bulb you want because it reacts based on the sensitivity from the light. When you start talking to the TVAs or the PHXs, they're actually absorbing a carbon count. So if you guys are interested in more in that, we can definitely help you with that, but that's more in our experts level where we dive into, talk about the physics and chemistry of an analyzer and dive into how it absorbs, how many carbon counts it is, what levels should be what, so that you kind of know. But, so it must read to the leak definition. This was back when dilution probes were in play because they couldn't get anything bigger on the log scale, so that you would add a dilution probe so that you could actually calculate how big the leak truly was. This is at 10,000 ppm, which now we're way lower than that. And then the scale readable within 2.5% of the leak definition. So as you guys all know, when you get certification cal gases, if you guys read the pieces, it says plus or minus 2%. That's where this came into play. So that when you're calibrating it, the gases are going to be within this, so the analyzer will read within the requirement of this reference. You guys also probably, if you guys are a contractor, you guys know that you have to do quarterly calibrations, and Method 21 is what calls this out, or what they call a precision calibration in Method 21. And with that is you have to do flow samples. So the pump must be within 0.1 liters per minute to 3 liters per minute. And if it's not, then you need to send it in to get fixed. Next step is intrinsically safe. All of them are. You can't get anything in a plant anymore without being intrinsically safe, except for maybe if you guys are using, have you guys used the FLIR GF320 or the FLIR camera? Maybe. There's one out called OpGal, which actually is Class 1 Div 2, but the FLIR cameras are not intrinsically safe, so if you do use those, you're going to have to get a hot work permit. The sniffers or the TVA and the PHXs, they are Class 1 Div 1 or Class 1 Div 2. So you don't have to go that. That's why your LDAR guys can just walk into a unit and get a permit pretty quick. And then it has to have a single hole probe, less than or equal to 0.25 inch outer diameter. So the hole on your probe tip cannot be anything greater than 0.25, because what it is if you think about it, you're coming in at an angle. If you get any bigger, you're coming farther out. And it's so that you can actually find the leaks that are within the packing or the stem area of a component. Because the bigger diameter you get, the farther it would push your probe away, so then you're not absorbing as close to the leak interface as possible. Most of them out there are all together. I think the ones that we use that are very generic are right around like 1/8 of an inch, basically, I think is what it is if you measure it. So you guys are good on that. But you just want to make sure that when you start looking at the probe piece, we do have a pointer. Awesome. Now I can even have fun. When you start doing this, a lot of folks have taken their technicians and they put the Tygon or Teflon tubing at the end, you know, the clear tubing, so they added it onto the top of their probes. Well, you want to make sure that you're not getting huge sets. I went to a site one time, and the guy hated when it got dirty. So he had his regular probe tip, then he had the Tygon tubing tip, and then he added in another section because he didn't want to get that one dirty, and because he couldn't find any other tubing. So this tip was huge by the time we got out there. It was a little bit over 1/2 of an inch. If you looked at his leak rate results, he wasn't finding anything. And who would? You're sitting all the way out here, basically, trying to come in on a leak. So you want to make sure if you guys are having that with your contractors or whoever is performing your monitoring, that you guys are staying within the specification. Because this is one where you can get dinged in an audit, and that's not fun. My personal advice is, instead of putting it on anything on your probe, just don't put the damn thing on and check it every once in a while and get it clean. Because if you're using a Tygon or which one's the softer one? Tygon? Yeah. So if you're using the Teflon one, so if it's very bendable, you need to make sure when you're having your technicians, I actually wrote this up as an audit finding, based on differences in leak rate results that we were seeing. And what we found out it to be is they were all using a piece on the outside of their probe, but when they'd go in, they would bend that Teflon tubing. So they were constricting the flow into the machine and reducing the amount that it was leaking. And so by removing it, and then we did a comparison out in the field, we were seeing almost perfect agreement. But when they had it on, we were seeing between about 20 to 30% difference in readings. So it's just something to consider also on this point. Yeah. And so it absorbs the hydrocarbons also, which can throw off the results. Another one, and this is kind of off topic with where we're at, but another one to make sure when you're talking with your technicians is make sure that they check the tubing on their probes that are going into the analyzer. We actually were out doing an audit just a couple weeks ago, and this young gentleman could not come anywhere close to the readings that we were getting. We'd find it at 800 and he would get 30. And then we'd find it again at 800 and he would get 30. So we kept going through and tried to do a whole bunch of troubleshooting, and we were there more not to audit but to help find a solution and help coach and help teach how to properly do method 21. And from there, what we found out is we couldn't, when he would go in to calibrate, we were getting perfect numbers. When we were pulling drift checks, he'd get 500. And we could not figure out what the hell was going on. So we started really just troubleshooting ideas, and when he would put it on his back, and the way that it would sit, it would actually bend into the housing, and he had about the end of an eraser pencil hole in his probe tubing. But when it was laying flat and it was perfect without any pressure on it, then it was closed and he'd get the right reading from the calibration gases. But when he got in the field, just by the way that it changed, this hole would open up, and so he was just basically sucking ambient air in. And so that's another thing to look for. And I'm sorry, that was a little off topic. But, so the response factors for each species shall be less than 10. The response time shall be less than 30 seconds, and the calibration precision shall be equal to or less than 10% of the cal gas value. So with all these, you got to remember this was all built off of the OVA 108. And back then, like I said, it was on a logarithmic scale, so you couldn't do it. It wasn't digital. Now most folks have put into place of saying, okay, I will live with the plus or minus, excuse me, I will live with the plus or minus 10%, but most folks have gone to a level of saying about 2.5. So when we audit, if we calibrate and we're doing everything, we try to get within 2.5% of the cal gas value, because we have the level of detail to get there. And if you actually look at it and you start to see it, if you calibrate within that accuracy at the beginning of the day, there's very little to no chance that you're ever going to go less than 10% and have to remonitor all of your results. So it's just a good idea to add into that piece. Response time shall be equal to or less than 30 seconds. So with this, as you guys all know, and this was another thing that came up just recently for us, is on your heavier product ends, it's going to take longer for the machine to respond to those, correct? So by just taking a little bit of time with your technicians and your site and actually looking at the product side so that they understand when I come in to do method 21, and we might touch on this in a second, but when I come in to do method 21, on a heavier end unit, I should spend a little bit more time during my survey. It's going to be the smaller blips is what I would want to look at. Because instead of a high end like propane, where you have a very quick response, when you're talking on your back ends, like your crude units or what might you have, it's going to take longer for the TVA to react. So you want to make sure that you're sitting there and actually letting the machine do what it needs to do. So talking with a technician and letting them kind of understand what is the process. They don't need to understand it from an engineering side, but here's heavy end units. Spend a little bit more time. The smaller blips you want to spend more time on. Versus, I'm out in the tank farm on the sphere and I touch it off and boom, I got a leak. No, that's not going to happen in a crude unit. So you just want to help them coach that. He's laughing at me back there. So I have great sound effects, I'm sorry. So, calibration, calibrate to the reference compound as specified. So back when this was written, there was only one compound. It was 10,000 ppm, or one leak definition, excuse me. And so with that, and with the log scale, that's all you could do. Well, now, with where we're at, we have multiple leak definitions. So with this one, it says calibrate to the reference compound specified in the applicable regulation. Default is methane. So most everybody uses methane gas at their sites. There's a few folks out there that use a couple different ones because that's what they're trying to monitor too. So don't ever worry about this unless you guys decide to go crazy, and then you can really dive into that. But the calibration standards are 0 gas, and then the reference compound in air near the leak definition. So how many leak definitions does a normal site have? Anybody? 4? That's pretty average for most folks. So you have a 10,000 because you still have your federal of your 10,000 unless you've triggered like VVA, which then pushes you to 500. But then you have other components, maybe your PRVs or something like that that's at a 10,000 level. Then you have your pumps with the lower definition is 2,000. then most of you should have valves around 500, I would assume, unless you're in certain areas. Then some folks have 100 ppm definition because that's their federal rule or their state rule. And then you have your zero compound. And the reason this is because you're forming a line basically in the analyzer so that when it reads a certain amount of carbons, because it takes carbon counts is what you're calibrating basically. It's a carbon count of that compound. And when you go into monitor, it's going to tell you how many carbons are coming out. And that's how it calculates to a ppm value. And so with each step and with each addition of a compound or a leak definition piece that you might have, you're able to get closer and more specific across. But if you don't have that, and let's say you just go 0 and 10,000, you only have 1 point out here. So you got this huge gap basically. So if you're 100 ppm leak definition, it's not going to come across. It's now so far off base that it wouldn't be accurate. So you have to calibrate to the closest leak definition of each certain type that you're doing to make sure that it comes across correctly. Does that make sense, or is that okay? So in the very beginning it says leak definition based on concentration. Place the probe inlet at the surface of the component where leakage can occur. Then move the probe along, blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But, so with this, what is this saying? It's saying, you shall do method 21. How many people have never performed method 21 in this room? Okay. How many people have contractors do method 21? Okay. How many folks could go out and audit somebody internally, do method 21 and see if they're doing it correctly? Okay. So this is the biggest point right here. If they're not placing the probe on the leaking surface, then you're not going to have good results. I've been at places where they actually float on the outside of the components because they don't want to get their probe dirty or have cross-contamination. So when you're auditing, make sure that folks are watching your folks, because at the end of the day, the data they turn in is your data. And you're the one signing off on the liability and anything that's being reported. So with that, what you want to do is make sure that they're actually placing the probe where leakage could occur. They're placing it. They're not floating. They're not doing anything. So make sure they're doing that. So you want to place the probe at the surface of the leak interface. So where would you, and we're going to get into this, I think, tomorrow or today, but where would you consider the area of the most potential leaks? On a valve, sorry. Stem packing, correct? Okay, so what would be more important? Me to spend a ton of time monitoring a bonnet, or me to spend more time in the packing in the stem area? Okay, so it's never going to directly come out and say it, but you have to do surveys basically on your components, and you're surveying the leaking interface. Well, when you go back to teacher technicians, or you guys are doing it, you want to make sure that from there you're spending less time at the least likely place to leak versus spending more time at the most leaking place. So I'm not saying do it wrong, but speed up more and go faster around the bonnet where it's very static, it doesn't move often, because you're less likely to find leaks. We find maybe 1 or 2% of our leaks on the bonnets, versus the other 98 and 99% is all in the packing in the stem area. Now, when you have connectors in play and things like that, it's all dependent on your site and what rules you're under. But even if you think about it, a connector is less likely to leak. I'm not out there torquing it. The only time you really see a connector leaking is when you have different thermal cycles, you're coming up or you're coming down, or something within the process has changed to make that connection act different. So what you want to do is make sure that when you're going around, you're surveying, and like I was saying earlier, you want to, if you're in a heavier inside unit, you want to spend a little bit longer time, or the smaller blips that you might see on the machine, you want to be able to notice those because the machine is going to react slower versus spending, speeding through it and seeing a huge blip. You want to make sure that you're stopping for even the smaller ones. And that's where we've been seeing a lot more issues or concerns with our auditing side is in the heavier ends unit, because the technicians are now at a level where they understand what they're supposed to do. But now with these lower leak definitions, you're not going to react as fast. And so when you start going through and speeding through during your survey time, you're not spending enough time to actually find the leaks. We're not saying sit there for 2 hours or 2 minutes. We're just saying make sure that the smaller blips you're recording and being able to capture. And once you find it, if applicable, if you do find something that's leaking or something along those lines, you need to move back to the highest point, and that's when you start your recording time value. So in this whole entire process, it should, on a basic 3/4 inch gate valve, it should take you about 10 seconds, 10 to 12 seconds to monitor it, to do it correctly. But no matter what, your machine's going to do, when you go through the precision, you're going to get a value. And it's going to be like 3, maybe 4 seconds is what it's calculating out to. Well, when you do find that high point, you have to do double the response time of the machine. And by that, if your machine calibrated during the precision to 4, now when you find a high reading, you got to hold it for 8 seconds. Most folks have stepped away from that as we've gotten a lot more electronic driven, where we have the archers and we have, the TVAs and whatnot, and you have guidewire and leak DOS. And in there, they just, and I think it's in here, but they just put in a required time for all components. So if it's a 3/4 inch valve, they say you are going to monitor this for 20 seconds. Instead of trying to trust, and trust might be a bad word, instead of holding somebody else accountable to do the best that they can, you're just taking that stress and that worry out. You're just making sure that it is getting done correctly. And so in here, I think there is a pyramid. I don't know on what page, but it's our recommended time values for what you should set the scan times to in your LDAR program. Most folks have, and contractors all have their own set. A lot of it's been derived based on our pyramid that Buzz Harris put together, who actually co-authored Method 21. And so a lot of folks have kind of tweaked it based on units or based on their own company policies, but to make sure that this was getting done correctly. So, Method 21 describes a process intended to find leaks. The intended goal is to find leaks. The process has some ambiguous areas. The enhanced monitoring procedures are intended to clarify ambiguous areas, ensure that all leaks are found without impact to productivity. I have absolutely no idea what that says, so I did not write that, and I can't tell you at all. So, but in the enhanced monitoring phase, survey. You want to check all the potential leak areas. And like we said earlier, you would want to spend more time where you know it's actually being actuated versus the ones that are just sitting stagnant or in a static area, just not being touched. The ones that are being actuated more are more likely to leak because you're putting wear and tear on the packing and anything that might be going on. Is there an increased meter reading? If you do see an increase, like we said earlier, make sure that your folks understand what type of process what type of process or stream is going through, because the heavier ends are going to take longer to respond to than the lighter ends. And then where did the maximum reading occur? So if you have a consent decree, which most folks do, you are very lucky in that you now have first attempts, or minimization attempts is what they call it in the consent decree. And what that is the luckiness of now I not only have a consent decree leak definition level, but now I get to make another attempt even earlier. Because what EPA found out was that by making an attempt at an earlier time or an earlier threshold, it's less likely to cause a leak on the big end. Well, how many people know that's not true? It helps, but if your technicians are torquing it and they over torque it, now they're just going to create a bigger leak. They also don't understand that when we do go in to do a repair attempt or something along those lines, they should step away for a couple seconds, because as you tighten that, you're actually pushing the gas or whatever might be in there back out into the atmosphere. So you're going to get a higher reading. So if you step away, kind of let it settle back down and then redo it, you're going to be able to fix it. Just a thought. So then you have to choose if you're going to dwell. Well, if I do my survey and I don't find anything even close, it looks like it's going to be above one of my leak definitions, do I have to stay there and sit for hours? No. You just move on. But if you do get a higher reading, then you want to go back and dwell on that point and then record all of that information. So, how long and where? Like we said, the easiest thing to do is look at the pyramid. I know it's in there. But on that pyramid, what you'll see is we have it broken out for insulated and non-insulated components. So as you go through this, you'll notice that sometimes you're going to have insulation all the way up past the bonnet. Some folks actually have it all the way up into like the hand wheel area. And if you do have that, make sure that you're letting your technicians know to come talk to y'all, because EPA actually put out an NOV for over-insulated components. But that's a side note on that one. But what you want to do is make sure that if you do have insulation, it's going to take less time, because you have more area that's covered than if you don't, it's going to take you more time. So make sure when you're looking at our pyramid that we have in there, you get that gist of size plus insulated or non-insulated components.
Everything that you're talking about is all enhanced LDAR program, right?
So survey mode begins when you place the probe on the leak interface. We've gone over this. Survey time should be dependent on component size. I touched on that. Like I said, I don't really talk off of bullet points. I'm sorry. I try to bring everything in and just do a quick recap. And then you need a consistent criteria for determining whether a dwell time is needed, and that criteria needs to take the probe speed into account. So with this, you need, whatever you choose to do, make sure you are meeting the requirements of method 21, but you're also being consistent throughout your program. So whatever choice you choose, make sure that you're putting it in place, and that's going to be the end-all, end-all. Don't kind of jump back and forth and pick and choose each time, because it's going to be very difficult at that point for anybody to make sure that you're doing this properly. The survey should cover all the potential leak areas if possible. And when we say if possible, this is talking about insulated and uninsulated components. Performing a complete survey made much easier by moving around the component rather than staying in one spot and reaching around it. So with this, what we're saying is, say you're in a tough spot and you can only get half of the valve on one side. Well, instead of trying to reach around and make all that effort and not being able to truly hit the leaking interface, stand up, walk around, get out of the area that's causing the issue, and monitor the other side of it. Don't do it half-butt or half-ass. I don't know what the proper term would be. So you want to make sure that when you're talking to folks like your technicians and the data that they're doing, is you understand it could take a little bit longer. But you would rather have them perform method 21 correct and do their survey correct versus having them not do it right and all of a sudden you get dinged and in trouble. Use ladders for elevated components when needed and available, rather than stretching or using extension probes. So with this, we all have seen our technicians out in the field where you stand on your tippy toes and You got that component way up high and you're just calling it good, correct? We've all seen that. I've done it. You're trying to do it. Well, you're not following the rule of method 21. Method 21 says you must place the probe at the leaking interface. So by me standing up there and not even touching it, but just touching the side of the valve, is that on the leaking interface? No. So you want to go and be able to get a ladder or something that will allow you that. There's also extension probes out there, which I think there's actually a couple vendors over there that have them, but they have articulated ones. So you can change it based on what direction you want to come in at so that you're still placing the probe at the leaking interface. So another food for thought. And it's a way folks have also gotten away from the 3% DTM cap issue that some facilities have. So survey time will depend on the length of the potential leak interface. A 3/4 inch valve with a welded bonnet may be less than 1 inch of potential leak interface, and a 6-inch gate valve with an uninsulated bonnet may have around 28 inches of potential leak interface. So survey time for the larger components will need to be longer if a uniform probe speed is used. So we have clients that said, I'm just putting 60 seconds for every component out there. They're going to spend 60 seconds monitoring it. I don't think anybody should go to that level. If you got a big valve, you should spend more time than if you have a 3/4 inch valve. There's a big difference between 1 inch of potential leak interface versus 28 inches. So you just need to make sure that when you're looking at this and surveying and developing your program into what it can and will be, that you're actually putting in the thought of survey time and component size, because that's going to play a huge part on technician productivity and being able to get your program to stay in compliance. CAPCOA has recommended a probe speed not more than 1/1 of a response time in inches per second. So if you're looking at 8 inches, you want a 1/8 the response time in inches per second. So if you have 8 seconds, you're going to move 1/8 of an inch per second, basically. Does that make sense? Or did I stumble through that too ugly for everybody? Okay. We've talked a lot about this. 99% of the valve leaks occur at the stem and the packing. Much less than 1% occur on the bonnet. So speed up going across the bonnet, spend more time where you're going to actually find a leak, because that's the more potential. What we recommend is about 0.1 inches per second for a stem and packing, and about 1 inch per second for the bonnet, if it's applicable. So as you can see, we're going extremely slow in the packing and the stem area, and we're going quite fast basically around the bonnets. And then, perfect, it's in here. So this is what I was saying is in here for you guys. So this is without a bonnet, and that's with a bonnet on that side. So anything that you can see without a bonnet, you're looking at 8 to 12 seconds for a 2-inch. And then with a bonnet, you're looking at 15 to 25 seconds. And this is just our recommended stuff. This is based on Buzz Harris and David Ranum, who helped Buzz develop Method 21 and a lot of the emission factor stuff. And they spent about 6 months just timing each other when they were out in the field at random places. And they would just click off and go, okay, oh, it took you about 8 seconds. Oh, it took you about 12 seconds. And then this is where we came up with the information. So they spent a lot of time trying to figure out what is the right way to do things. Method 21 indicates that if an increased meter reading is observed, you should return to the maximum point. Does this really mean if a background is 3 ppm and you get a reading of 3.01, should you dwell? Who can answer that question? Would that be an increased meter reading? If I went from 3 to 3.01? Yeah. That's why when we're talking about processes and understanding if it's a heavy end or a lighter end area, I would never sit and dwell for 20 seconds on a 0.01 increase. Now, if I was in a heavier ends unit and I had 3 ppm as my background and I jumped up to like 60, I would probably dwell a little while and see what's going on, and especially try to find out where it would be. Now, if I was in a lighter ends unit and I had 3 ppm as my background and I jumped up to, let's say, 20 by going very fast, I would probably go back and dwell again, because I would have this hit that happened and it jumps really fast. So you want to make sure that on that you would have, the understanding of, do I dwell or do I not dwell? It's all dependent on what you know, and a lot of your techs or folks, you'll get so used to your machine and what it does, because no machine is the same. They're all made by the same people and they all do the same thing, but each machine functions a little different. I have my own personal one that I use within Sage, and I know how it reacts. I know when I need to spend time because I've used it for so long. But if I go use a different one, then I kind of have to relearn how it's reacting and if it's quick or whatnot, depending on the pump flow and all of that. So it's all dependent. Dwell criteria should be influenced by survey speed. A fast survey will need a lower dwell decision in order to catch all leaks. A slower survey can use a higher dwell decision criterion. So what we're saying here is, if you put in a rule into your program that says, okay, for every component, you're going to monitor for 60 seconds. Well, with the slower survey time, you can say if it jumps from 3 to, let's say 25, they don't need to worry about it. But with the slower one, what we're saying is you can have a higher dwell criterion. So if it jumps from 3 to 20, you wouldn't have to worry about it because you're going so slow, because you know that you've captured it based on your survey result. But if you have a very fast time and it jumps from 3 to 20, then you should probably go back and dwell, because you're going faster around. So the longer you spend or the slower you do it, the higher you could tell your technicians to say, okay, don't worry about it. Versus the slower time you spend, then it would be the opposite. Does that make sense for y'all? Because when we actually ask these questions to technicians out in the field when we're doing a consent decree audit or just helping with programs, a lot of technicians don't even know what this is. If you even ask them why they're monitoring, they don't know what method 21 even is. They say, because I just put on a pack and this is what I was told to do. And so you want to make sure that they understand that this is important. There is rules out there. This is why we're doing it. I'm not just paying you to go look like a Ghostbuster and have fun all day. I'm paying you because this data is important and there are certain criteria that you need to know. Once you decide to dwell, you must decide on how long to remain there and determine if it's a leak or not. So if you find a reading from 3 to 20, I go back and I dwell on it. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I don't want to be rude, but I think a lot of people it's 15 minutes.
Oh, shit, I'm sorry. I'm an hour behind on my watch, so you guys go ahead. I'm sorry. You guys should have stopped me earlier. So, thanks, David.